Chapter 2206. He suddenly jumped up. You are the idiot. You are not allowed to scold my father. Shinjuli was speechless. The heavenly lost stone could not help but laugh again. Shinjuli glanced at it coldly, and the heavenly lost stone could not help but tremble. It was not convinced. Why are you looking at me? Idiot. Help me recover as soon as possible. The heavenly lost stone was speechless. You are the idiot, right? Not only did you scold yourself, but you also let your son scold you. The heavenly lost stone muttered in its heart, but it was still very happy. In the last time when they sealed Zisha, Shinjuli used the power of his soul to completely purify Zisha. He was dead and there was no hope for him to be resurrected. At that time the heavenly lost stone was very worried. It was afraid that it would break its promise to Ning Xuema. It did not expect that at the moment when Ning Xuema was reborn here, it could capture the complete soul of Shinjuli. The absorption ability of this soul was unusually strong. The heavenly lost stone used its own supreme spiritual power to nourish it. It absorbed the souls that had long been annihilated between heaven and earth and slowly gathered them together to form a lotus in its body, allowing him to be reborn. However, although he was reborn, his growth was very slow. He could have recovered his body in half a month, but he only returned to the form of a baby. This time, if little Nianma was not in danger and triggered a nerve of the Divine Lord, he would not have woken up. Sure enough, the power of stimulation from family was strong. Little Nianma's words made the Divine Lord want to recover quickly. The heavenly lost stone took the opportunity to negotiate with Shinjuli. I can help you recover as soon as possible, but you have to provide me with a blood-red crystal. I can double the spiritual power in here. Shinjuli did not speak. He slowly opened his palm and a red light flashed in it. A crystal-clear blood-red stone appeared. The heavenly lost stone was speechless. Shin Yinma looked at the stone curiously. This stone is very beautiful. It is much more beautiful than the white stone. Heavenly Tao stone. It had no time to quarrel with the father and son. With a little force, the blood-red stone flew directly from Shinjuli's hand and landed on a crystal. Then, the color of the blood-red stone faded at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, it was reduced to dust. The crystal in the crystal cave seemed to have absorbed enough energy. Its color became brighter, and the light waves inside it flickered even more intensely. Even Shin Yinma could feel the surge of energy inside. Shinjuli glanced at the image displayed on the crystal ball. Ning Xuema was still standing on the coffin. Around her, the soldiers were lying on the ground. The rest who could still stand were hiding far away, not daring to come close. More and more soldiers arrived, and the titles of the generals leading them also increased. All the citizens of Nether City were alarmed by this incident. People were jostling as they rushed over. Looking from the crystal ball, they saw a sea of black heads. After Ning Xuema defeated a large number of soldiers from the underworld, most of them did not dare to come forward. They only stood at a distance and shouted. Ning Xuema did not explain. She only said one sentence, "Go and ask your King Yama to come here." When she first said this sentence, the leading soldiers laughed loudly at her. They laughed at her for not knowing her own strength and wanting to see King Yama without knowing her own strength. Then the leading soldier insisted that Ning Xuema was the thief who stole the child. He ordered the soldiers to shoot arrows as if he wanted to turn her into a hedgehog. Chapter 2207. The rain of arrows was like a swarm of locusts flying toward Ning Xuema. Ning Xuema did not even move. Instead, she twirled her long whip. In the blink of an eye, all the arrows were deflected by her long whip. All the arrowheads were gone, and the long arrows that had lost their arrowheads all flew back and hit their owners. Thus the archers fell to the ground. Her move shocked all the citizens and the soldiers. Finally, someone rushed to report to the Netherworld King. "Mother is so cool." Little Nianma was excited. He then turned to ask Shinjuli, "Isn't my mother cool?" Shinjuli closed his eyes to rest and ignored him. Little Nianma touched his nose and turned to look at the crystal ball again. He did not want to miss any scene. Perhaps because they had been together for a long time, little Nianma did not notice that his companion had grown taller. Dark clouds were surging in the distance, and a shout came from afar. "Hades is here! Hades is here!" The people of Hades City knelt on the ground to welcome their king. Among the people who knelt, Ning Xuema, who was standing on the coffin, stood out like a crane in a flock of chickens. Hades was riding on a black tiger. The roar of the black tiger made the surrounding people kneel on the ground and shiver. Hades was accompanied by many guards and ministers. Each of them was riding on a ferocious beast. It was a big group of people with great power. These people had their own power. Even if they were walking on the road, they were still very impressive. The people on both sides of the road could not lift their heads. At this moment, the invisible power generated by Hades and the high-ranking officers was pressing toward Ning Xuema, who was standing on the coffin. If it was someone who was slightly weaker, there was no need for the Nether King to speak. Just this pressure alone was enough to make people bow their heads and kneel, trembling in fear. However, Ning Xuema just stood there casually with a trace of a lazy smile on her lips. It was as if she didn't feel the strong pressure coming from the other side. The officer next to Hades shouted at Ning Xuema, "Who are you? Why aren't you kneeling in front of His Majesty the King of Hell?" A sharp voice pierced through the air and reverberated through the entire street, indicating that this person's kung fu was not low. Ning Xuema smiled lazily. "I want to see your Lord of Hell, not to bow down to him." At this moment, she was still dressed like an ordinary woman in the underworld. The Netherworld King and his subordinates sized her up but couldn't recognize who she was. The Nether King had obviously heard about her on the way here. He asked in a deep voice, "Where did this woman come from? Why did he destroy a jade store? Why did you kill so many soldiers?" While he was speaking, the masters of the underworld had quietly spread out and surrounded Ning Xuema. Ning Xuema didn't seem to notice the soldiers surrounding her. She smiled faintly. "Kill or injure? I did injure them, but killing them? I won't admit to this crime." As soon as she finished speaking, she flicked her fingertips and countless gusts of wind flew out. The deathly pale and motionless soldiers on the ground moved their bodies and then jumped up from the ground. Everyone had a blank look on their faces as if they had just fallen asleep. The reason why the Netherworld King was alarmed this time was not because the jade store was destroyed, but because these soldiers were knocked down. Everyone thought that they had been killed. Now that they had all jumped up and were alive and well, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 2208. The Nether King's face finally looked better. "What do you mean by this?" Ning Xuema smiled. "If not, why would your Majesty come here personally?" The Nether King said, "So you made such a big commotion just to see me. Now that you have seen me, can you tell me your purpose?" Ning Xuema said, "I wonder what your Majesty thinks about the people losing their children?" The Nether King frowned. "I have sent people to investigate this matter thoroughly. Have you found anything?" The Nether King's eyes were sharp. "Maybe I have found something." Ning Xuema raised her eyebrows. What do you mean? You found the mastermind behind this? Who is it?" The Nether King sneered. "Far away on the horizon, right in front of you." Ning Xuema smiled. "So your Majesty is suspecting me. If you suspect someone, you need evidence. I wonder what evidence your Majesty has to prove that I am the mastermind behind this?" A minister beside the Nether King couldn't help. "You still don't admit it? If you are not the mastermind behind this, why did you destroy the jade shop?" Ning Xuema crossed her arms. "How is destroying the jade shop related to losing children?" The minister sneered. "You know that the white jade dolls sold by the jade shop are protective dolls. Buying these dolls can prevent the children from being lost. You are afraid that all the children in the city will have such dolls, so you will not be able to get your way. Naturally, you will destroy the jade shop first. Now that there are witnesses and evidence, you still dare to quibble? Who are you? You must have a sinister motive for doing this. You want the people of the Netherworld to have no descendants. Your intention is worthy of death." The minister was eloquent. His words had already pinned countless labels on Ning Xuema. Ning Xuema ignored the minister and turned her gaze to the Nether King. "Your Majesty also believes that the dolls in the jade shop are protective dolls?" The Nether King choked. After all, he was recuperating in the palace. He only heard a little about this matter and didn't take it to heart. Now that he heard Ning Xuema's question, he couldn't answer. "This? It is said that the children who bought these dolls were not lost. Your Majesty, it's true. The children who bought dolls were all safe and sound at home. Even if they ran around the streets, they wouldn't get lost. However, many of the children who didn't buy dolls suddenly disappeared." Someone in the crowd shouted. That's right, that's right. The kid from old Jiang's house next door had this doll. That kid didn't go missing. My son was playing with him, but he went missing." Someone echoed loudly. Yes, mine is the same. My daughter used to play with Jiu on the streets. My daughter suddenly disappeared, but Jiu was still fine. At that time Jiu was hugging a white jade doll. Right. More and more people echoed in the crowd. This proved that the white jade doll was indeed a guardian doll. With so many witnesses, it was even more certain that the white jade doll was the guardian doll. The Nether King nodded slightly. His gaze landed on Ning Xuema. "What do you have to say now?" Ning Xuema did not bat an eyelid. Very good. Then are most of the parents who lost their children here? Come out first. I have something to ask you. Those who lost their children were filled with grief and indignation. At this moment, the Nether King was here to support them. Hence, they weren't afraid that Ning Xuema would play tricks on them. They all stood out. These people who lost their children were filled with grief and indignation. Now they indeed suspected that Ning Xuema was the thief who secretly stole their children. Chapter 2209. These people had long been filled with grief and indignation after losing their children. Now that they suspected that Ning Xuema was the child thief, they were naturally filled with righteous indignation. If it weren't for Ning Xuema's profound martial arts, they would have thrown rotten eggs at her on the spot. Ning Xuema ignored their murderous gazes and said coldly, "Before your children were lost, did they play with the children who held the white jade dolls?" After she asked this question, the crowd fell silent. The parents of the children came from all over the country and didn't know each other. However, at this time they almost spoke in unison. "Yes, my child was like this. My child was like this too. My daughter," people spoke one after another. Among the 58 parents who lost their children, 9 out of 10 admitted this. The parents who didn't admit it didn't know who their children played with before they were lost. Ning Xuema looked at Pluto with a faint smile. "Your Majesty, what do you think after hearing this? Do you still think that those white jade dolls are protective dolls?" Pluto looked at the minister in charge of investigating the case. "Is this true?" Sweat rolled down the minister's forehead and he nodded. I have already investigated it. It is true. However, I have also investigated the children who held the white jade dolls. They were all children of normal and good families. There was nothing wrong with them. Moreover, they played with many other children. Those children were not lost. It was just a few that were lost." Pluto wasn't really confused. His face darkened. "Nonsense. Since the lost children played with the children who held the dolls, it proves that there is indeed something wrong with the white jade dolls. Why didn't you investigate it in the shops? Instead, you let the people buy the white jade dolls here as a kind of protective charm?" The minister was sweating profusely. I was negligent. Because the children in the city were lost one after another, as the minister in charge of investigating the case, he was under a lot of pressure. He wished that the children would never be lost again. If the white jade dolls could protect those children and prevent them from being lost, the pressure on him would be less. Therefore he just let it be and even added fuel to the fire. Pluto sneered, "How could you overlook such an obvious suspicious point? Is your job as an imperial censor for nothing?" The official lowered his head and prostrated himself on the ground. "At first, I did have my suspicions and secretly visited this shop, but there was nothing suspicious about it. Young Master also said that I was investigating in the wrong direction, so..." The Nether King frowned. The young master that the minister was talking about was the Nether King's eldest son. He was talented and bold and could be considered a capable person. Back then, the Nether King was wrongly imprisoned in the immortal world's heavenly prison. The Nether world had no leader, so this eldest son became the substitute Nether King. A few days ago, this substitute Yama joined forces with the immortal world to attack the Mo Palace under the pretext of avenging his father. Originally he wanted to get a share of the loot. However, he didn't expect that Ning Xuema, the Devil Master, would return in time and all his efforts would be in vain. Not only did he fail to seize the territory but he also got injured all over and almost lost his life. Fortunately, after Ning Xuema came back, not only did she clear her name, but she also cleared Pluto's name. After the Celestial Emperor returned, he personally welcomed the Netherworld King out of the prison and apologized to him. After comforting him, he sent him back to the Netherworld. The Nether King was in charge of the Netherworld again, and the substitute Nether King was recuperating in the Nether Hall. Although the Nether King wasn't mistreated in the heavenly prison, the people of the Netherworld had a special physique. Naturally, they were very sensitive to the baleful aura in the immortal world's heavenly prison. Chapter 2210. Although the Netherworld King wasn't tortured in the celestial prison, the people of the underworld had a special physique. The celestial prison in the immortal world was very sensitive to the evil spirit, which consumed a lot of his physical strength. Although he wasn't tortured, being locked in the prison for almost a month had consumed more than half of his power. He had been cultivating in the palace these days, and he wouldn't come out unless there was a big matter. He naturally didn't care about such a trivial matter as losing a few children in the city. If it wasn't for Ning Xuema causing havoc in the streets and killing and injuring hundreds of underworld experts, he wouldn't have been disturbed. The Netherworld King thought his son was recuperating, so he didn't expect him to be involved in such a trivial matter. He didn't take it to heart and reprimanded the official. You are the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice. Why do you need to disturb to investigate such a case? The official's face was bitter. Yes, I know my mistake. It wasn't that he wanted to disturb the substitute Netherworld King, but after this matter came out, the substitute Netherworld King summoned him to the palace and asked him personally. He naturally had to report the truth. It was the young master who said that the direction of his investigation was wrong. He asked him to secretly investigate the demon world because he suspected that this matter had something to do with the sudden increase in the power of the demon world's demon master. Of course, this kind of thing couldn't be said in public, so the official had to admit his mistake. The Netherworld King's gaze fell on the boss who was selling the white jade doll. Why are you selling white jade dolls here? What kind of spell did you cast on the doll? Tell me the truth. The boss immediately cried out that he was wronged, saying that there was nothing wrong with his white jade doll. He was just a craftsman who sold it to make a living. How could he cast a spell? The boss didn't like to talk much when he was selling things, but he was eloquent when it came to defending himself. His words made the people around him nod. Because all the white jade dolls in the shop had been destroyed, the Netherworld King ordered people who had already bought the white jade dolls to send a few more up. The soldiers took 5 or 6 white jade dolls from the people who were watching the scene. The Netherworld King examined them carefully, but he didn't find anything wrong. There was no evil spirit on the dolls either. There was no lack of experts around the Netherworld King. These people checked the dolls again, but they didn't find anything strange. The Netherworld King turned his gaze to Ning Xuema. Why do you think that there is something wrong with the dolls? Perhaps the loss of those children had nothing to do with this white jade doll, and everything was just a coincidence. The corner of Ning Xuema's mouth hooked up as she looked around. How can there be so many coincidences in this world? Your Majesty, what jade is this white jade doll made of? How was the carving? How long does it take to carve such a doll? The Netherworld King was experienced and knowledgeable. He looked at the doll in his hand and said, "This jade should be white jade. It's not very expensive and the carving is not bad. It takes about 3 or 4 days to carve one." Then, Your Majesty, how much do you think a doll like this should be sold for? Hades frowned. 300 taels of silver should be reasonable. But he only sold your people for 20 coins. Ning Xuema chuckled. Your Majesty, don't you find it strange? Before the Nether King could say anything, the shop owner beside him shouted angrily, I'm only selling this white jade doll to establish good karma, not to earn money. The shop owner looked as if he had been wronged. Is it wrong to form good karma? Must I be an unscrupulous merchant? His words received the response of countless people. People were very welcoming to this kind of unscrupulous merchant, and the crowd was buzzing with praises. Chapter 22:11. Ning Xuema secretly shook her head. Everyone knew that there was no such thing as a free lunch. Even if there was a free lunch, it would most likely be a trap. But if there was a free lunch, everyone would fight for it. Ning Xuema smiled. So you are the reincarnation of a bodhisattva. Well, I'll take it that you're compensating me. How many of these dolls have you carved? Why haven't you sold all of them after such a long time? The number of dolls in your shop is also not low. The shop owner snorted. I have carved these dolls long ago. I have a lot of them stored. What's so strange about not selling them all? The people around nodded again. Ning Xuema's lips curved into a smile. What you said makes sense. Then let me ask you, did you make this white jade doll? The shop owner's eyes flickered slightly, but he raised his head. Of course. I am a famous jade carving master. Then how long does it take you to carve these dolls? You have sold more than 4,000 white jade dolls, right? It takes 3 to 4 days to carve a doll. Just take it that you are a fast worker. 3 days is enough. It takes more than 10,000 days to carve 3 to 4,000 dolls, which is more than 30 years. You look like you are only 30 years old. Have you been working hard for this charity since you were born? The shop owner was stumped by the question. He paused and said, These white jade dolls are not made by me alone. I used to have a jade carving workshop and I employed many jade carving masters. Where are those jade carving masters now? Can you call a few of them to testify for you? Ning Xuema pressed. The shop owner's forehead was covered in cold sweat and he said proudly, That workshop has long been dissolved, and those jade carving masters have also left. Where can I find them to testify? That's really unfortunate. But it doesn't matter. Although the workshop has been dissolved, the jade carving masters will not go missing. You should know their identities and origins. Then, you can name a few of them and let His Majesty Pluto send people to find them. The shop owner's forehead was covered in more cold sweat. They are not from the underworld. Even if they are not from the underworld, the 6 realms are still connected. With His Majesty Pluto's means, it should be easy to find a few famous jade carving masters in the 6 realms. Isn't that right, Your Majesty? The Netherworld King nodded. He was confident about this. That's right. Why don't you tell me? I will send someone to investigate and ask. The shop owner's eyes flickered. He made up his mind and named a few jade carving masters. However, they were all unknown and lived in a very remote place. Even if the Netherworld King investigated according to the map, it would still take 4 to 5 days. The Nether King didn't hesitate and immediately sent people to investigate. Ning Xuema sighed. There's no need to check. It must be fake. The Netherworld King naturally asked for the reason. Ning Xuema said, Your Majesty, please find a few local jade carving masters. I have something to ask them. Of course, there were jade carving masters in Nether City. There were a few in the crowd and they were even experts. After getting Nether King's permission, they all stood up and walked into the circle. Ning Xuema glanced at them. How are your jade carving skills? Before those people could speak, someone shouted from the side, They are the most famous jade carving masters in the city. Their craftsmanship is naturally excellent. Everyone agreed. It could be seen that these people were somewhat famous in Nether City. Ning Xuema only asked them one question. Masters, when you make jade carvings, can you carve exactly the same thing? Not the slightest difference? Chapter 22:12. The jade carving masters looked at each other and shook their heads. It's possible to carve a similar one, but it's too difficult to carve an identical one. That's right. Even if you can carve an identical one, every piece of jade has a different quality. It's impossible to be identical. Even if you copy it, you can't do it. There's always a slight difference in size. Ning Xuema smiled. Then, what if there's an identical one? The jade carving masters shook their heads. Impossible. It's impossible. Ning Xuema chuckled. But this shop owner did it. I found the exact same doll in this shop. Ning Xuema took out 4 dolls. 2 of them were wearing red doo-doo and the other 2 were wearing blue doo-doo. Everyone take a look at these 4 dolls and broaden your horizons. The 4 dolls were passed around by the jade carving masters. Finally, they were passed to the Netherworld King. Everyone was astonished. They were too similar. Even if they were cast from the same mold, they wouldn't be so similar. There wasn't a single difference. Everyone looked at each other and finally looked at the shop owner. The Netherworld King said in a low voice, What do you say now? The shop owner gritted his teeth and said, These dolls aren't mine. This woman made them casually. After all, these dolls were taken out from Ning Xuema, so his explanation was reasonable. Ning Xuema smiled again. You're really good at quibbling. I clearly bought these dolls from your shop, but you don't want to admit it. It doesn't matter. It seems that you won't give up until you reach the Yellow River. She glanced at the crowd. I believe that many of you have bought dolls. Why don't you take them out and see if there's anything similar? Because the commotion caused by Ning Xuema's actions wasn't small, it attracted the attention of many people. As a result, there were countless people who had already bought their dolls. Some of them even brought their dolls with them and took them out one after another. Of course, because it wasn't easy to buy them, no one wanted to be confiscated. They only let their children hold them and stand at the front of the line. The soldiers went to check them one by one. After checking 700 to 800 of them, they finally found 2 identical ones. After comparing them together, they were indeed exactly the same. The Nether King's gaze landed on the shop owner again. His gaze was sharp. What else do you have to say now? How did you get this jade doll that looks exactly the same? The truth was right in front of his eyes. The boss was tongue-tied and couldn't defend himself. The occasional similarity is purely a coincidence. At this point, no one believed the boss's words. The Nether King said angrily, You still dare to lie? The shopkeeper threw caution to the wind and said, Your Majesty, even if this commoner's dolls are completely similar, they have never harmed anyone. On the contrary, they have saved people. Those who buy this commoner's dolls are all safe, aren't they? Why does your Majesty need to ask this commoner how these dolls were made? The Nether King frowned. There must be a reason behind this. Although the child who owned the doll didn't go missing, the other children who played with him went missing. Who knows if you didn't cast a strange spell on the doll to make the other children lose their minds and be abducted? Your Majesty, this is all your speculation. It can't be used as evidence to prove that this commoner did it. The Nether King said, then how do you explain why these white jade dolls look exactly the same? Since you're innocent, why are you afraid of telling the truth? Chapter 22:13. The shop owner was stunned. He gritted his teeth and said, This is the secret recipe of my family. Forgive me for not being able to tell you. Ning Shuima crossed her arms and listened. Suddenly she smiled and said, I might have found his method. She kicked the coffin below and said, the secret should be inside. Actually, everyone had noticed the big red coffin when they came. However, they were distracted by the war of words later. Now that they heard what Ning Shuima said, everyone looked at the coffin. The most common thing for the people of Nether City was coffins. They saw that this coffin was brighter and bigger, but there was nothing strange about it. Everyone looked at Ning Shuima and waited for her to give an answer. The shop owner's face changed slightly. He quietly took a step back. Ning Shuima saw the change in his expression and became even more convinced of her inference. She jumped down from the coffin, the corner of her mouth slightly hooked up. Up until now, there have been 6 groups of people who wanted to destroy this coffin. Fortunately, I was quick-witted and didn't let them destroy it. She kicked the coffin and sent it flying. It spun in the air and then fell somewhere else. The onlookers didn't know what she was doing. They looked at the coffin and saw that it was still intact. They didn't see anything wrong with it. Someone with sharp eyes suddenly shouted, What is that? Everyone looked in the direction that the man was pointing and sucked in a breath of cold air. At the place where the coffin was originally, there were 6 badly mutilated people lying there. These 6 people were holding sharp weapons in their hands. They were pressed into the ground and didn't move at all. The Nether King looked at the 6 people and then looked at the coffin. These 6 people wanted to pry open the bottom of the coffin and steal the things inside? Ning Shuima said indifferently, Your Majesty is wise. These 6 people did want to use the earth escape technique to break the bottom of the coffin. I found them in time and knocked them unconscious. The Nether King was speechless. Soldiers had already gone over and pulled out the 6 people like pulling out radishes. Of the 6 people, 4 were already dead and the other 2 were seriously injured and unconscious. The underworld had its own methods to wake them up. However, when the 2 of them woke up and looked around, their eyes flashed with ruthlessness. Ning Shuima had just said, in case they commit suicide. But before she could finish her sentence, the 2 men's heads tilted to the side and blood flowed from the corners of their lips. It was obvious that both of them had a strong poison hidden in their mouths. Once they realized that something was wrong, they would bite open their medicine pouches and commit suicide. The Nether King looked at the shop owner with a cold gaze. Who sent them? The shopkeeper's face was pale, but his expression was innocent. This commoner doesn't know. The Nether King ordered, Search these people. Let's see what markings we can find. A moment later, the person in charge of the body search reported, Your Majesty, these people are very clean. I can't tell their origins. Only one of them has a token. He presented a black jade token. Ning Shuima also saw the token, and her eyes narrowed slightly. That token looked very similar to her Mo Palace's token of entry and exit. This was a prelude to slander her Mo Palace. Fortunately she was here. Otherwise, Mo Palace would definitely be the scapegoat. Although the Nether King had never seen Mo Palace's token, the word on it was enough for him to guess who it was. The Nether King's face was gloomy, and the general beside him also saw the token. Chapter 22:14. The Netherworld King's face sank. The general beside him also saw the plaque and blurted out, Could they be sent by the demon realm? What does that demon master want to do? Isn't it enough that she injured our current Netherworld King and many generals? She also wants to harm our children. The other generals and ministers were also furious. Does that demon master still hold a grudge against us for attacking back then? She wants revenge. That's highly possible. Demons are demons after all. They like to seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Although we were deceived back then and followed them to attack, I'm afraid that Demon Master will hold a grudge against us for the rest of her life and want to take revenge at all times. Then she's too cruel. Didn't she say that she would let bygones be bygones? Although the Mo Palace suffered a great loss, our netherworld also suffered a great loss. Ning Shuima crossed her arms and listened to their discussion. She didn't interrupt, but the corners of her lips curled up into a cold smile. Were these people idiots? Which assassin would bring something so obvious with them when they went out to do something? People who could be called assassins were all ruthless and meticulous. They were assassins, not substandard goods. How could they make such a low-level mistake? The Netherworld King raised his hand and stopped everyone's discussion. Maybe someone framed her. Everything is not set in stone yet. Don't make wild guesses. His words silenced everyone. The Netherworld King looked at Ning Xuema again. What's in this coffin? Ning Xuema tapped the coffin lid with the stick in her hand and said casually, "You'll know once you open it." The coffin lid was opened by Ning Xuema with a stick, and the item inside was finally revealed. The item in the blood-red coffin was very simple. It was just a jar. The jar looked very ordinary. It looked a bit like a common cinerary urn. The only difference was that it was bone-white and looked very dull. What's this? The Netherworld King looked at the shop owner. The shop owner said, "This is the cinerary urn of my wife. My wife and I had always loved each other. She passed away before me. I was very reluctant to part with her, so I sealed her ashes in this jar and placed them in the coffin. They've been with me ever since." He made up a very smooth lie. Ning Xuema sneered, "So this is your beloved wife's ashes? What is the meaning of the blood coffin?" This commoner's wife loved to wear red when she was alive. This commoner is only helping her fulfill her wish. Ning Xuema chuckled. Is that so? She lowered her head and looked at the inconspicuous jar. It does look like an urn. I just don't know if there are any ashes inside. She reached out to grab the jar, but the shopkeeper rushed over. Don't disturb her. His eyes were filled with anger. The dead should be respected. Don't tell me you won't even let the dead go? Before he could reach her, he was swatted away by Ning Xuema's sleeve. The shop owner staggered from Ning Xuema's swing. Ning Xuema laughed and said, "Why are you panicking? If it really is an urn, no one will do anything to it." She then looked at the Netherworld King. "Your Majesty, why don't you send someone to examine this item?" The Netherworld King waved his hand and summoned a coroner to look at the jar. The coroner went forward and bent down to pick up the jar. He first shook it, then shook it. He opened the jar and sniffed it. Then he reported, "Your Majesty, this jar doesn't contain ashes. This jar seems to be made from bones." The Netherworld King glanced at the pale-faced shopkeeper and ordered the coroner, "What is in the jar?" Chapter 22:15. The coroner reached his hand into the jar and pulled out two small, white figures. The small figures were less than half a foot long. They looked like the skeletons of a bony fetus, but they were jade-like. "What are these?" the Nether King asked. The shopkeeper opened his mouth and tried his best to lie. This is this commoner's unborn child. This commoner's wife died in childbirth." The coroner couldn't stand it anymore. He slapped the shop owner and said, "There are 10 skeletons of these children in here. They all died in your wife's womb? Is your wife a pig? Why are you still lying to me? 10 skeletons like this? A jar made of ashes with 10 skeletons of fetuses in it." Everyone knew that this situation was very strange. This jar was probably a super evil item. Ning Xuema said, "Your Majesty, why don't you throw a white jade doll in there and see what effect it has?" As expected, the Nether King ordered someone to put a white jade doll in the jar. A faint green light came out of the jar. After a while, the light disappeared and 2 identical white jade dolls appeared at the mouth of the jar. Gasps of surprise could be heard from the crowd. They finally understood where the white jade dolls came from. The Nether King didn't give up. He put another doll in there. After a while, he got 2 more identical dolls. "Tell me, why did you make this evil item?" The minister of the Ministry of Justice asked the shop owner angrily. Then he signaled to the soldiers beside him. The soldiers rushed forward and pressed the shop owner to the ground. The shop owner was also a ruthless person. He still refused to admit it. "Your Majesty, I can only tell you the truth. I don't have any intention to harm anyone. I made these dolls because of a dream 3 years ago. 3 years ago, when I was resting at home, I dreamt that a golden armored god told me that there would be a child disaster in Nether City 3 years later. I had to use this item to make white jade dolls and give them to the children of the people to avoid it. He also taught me how to make white jade dolls. When I woke up, I didn't want to believe it. However, when I saw the jar that the golden armored god gave me, I started to doubt it. Therefore, he began to prepare those things according to the golden armor god's instructions. After testing it, he was able to replicate the white jade doll. Only then did I believe it. At the time, the golden armor god said that this was a heavenly secret and could not be told to anyone, so I had been secretly preparing and had never told anyone. Your Majesty, look, although the origin of this white jade baby is strange, it has not harmed anyone, has it? You even saved countless children. These words were made up in such a convincing manner that he was not a villain with evil intentions, but a bodhisattva who came to save people from trouble. Unfortunately, the child who had bought the white jade doll was fine. The onlookers who had heard his nonsense were also doubtful. Those who had taken the white jade dolls from the children's hands stuffed them back into the children's hands. Even the parents who had contributed their dolls to the Netherworld King were begging for them in low voices. Some of them even wanted to put the white jade doll in their hands into the jar and make a few more copies. There were also commoners who begged the Netherworld King to release this kind and righteous shop owner. Such a good person couldn't be captured. In just a moment, the crowd was buzzing. 8 out of 10 people were pleading for the boss. Chapter 22:16. Lord Yama frowned. He was not stupid, so he did not believe the nonsense of the shop owner. However, the ordinary people were the kind of people who would grab hold of a life-saving straw when they were in danger. They would not even care if the straw was a trap. Even the soldiers who were holding the shop owner loosened up a little and allowed him to stand up. The moment the shop owner stood up, he proudly glanced at Ning Xuema. He wanted to laugh at Ning Xuema, but when he looked into Ning Xuema's cold eyes, he could not help but shudder. He did not dare to scold her. Instead he sneered. I have a clear conscience. However, this woman came in and smashed my shop. She even framed me. What is the reason? At this time he began to make false accusations. Ning Xuema frowned slightly. She did not expect the shop owner to have the ability to distort the truth. She thought that by exposing the origin of the white jade doll, she would be able to expose his conspiracy. However, she did not expect him to reverse the situation with just a few words. Unfortunately, there were not many people in the underworld who really understood the situation. They began to question Ning Xuema's intention. In an instant, Ning Xuema became the target of the arrows. The situation became chaotic again. Little Nianma had been watching from the crystal ball. When he saw the situation, he trembled with anger. He clenched his little fists tightly. These people are too stupid. Do they want to wait until they suffer a great loss before they believe that the white jade doll is actually a harmful thing? Shinjuli was meditating. He looked at the crystal ball for a moment and almost understood the cause and effect of the matter. He looked at Ning Xuema. Although she stood there calmly, her little mouth was slightly pursed. Obviously, the situation was a little tricky for her. She did not think of a way to deal with it. Meanwhile, the people in the underworld were condemning her. The waves of voices were getting louder and louder. Shinjuli narrowed his eyes. A group of bastards who did not know what was good for them. His gaze fell on the blood-red coffin, and after looking around, the corners of his lips curled up slightly. He ignored the angry little Nianma and closed his eyes. He put his palms together in front of his chest as if he was meditating. However, his posture was completely different from before. A faint white light shot out from his fingertips, penetrating through the barrier of the heavenly lost stone and into the ground. Little Nianma's eyes were fixed on the crystal ball, so he did not notice what his father was doing. He rubbed his head and asked, "What should we do?" What to do? These people were muddle-headed and didn't know what was good for them. What should they do? Mother was obviously doing it for their own good. She wanted to save their child, but instead she was insulted and scolded by them. That Hell King is also a bastard. Could it be that he also believed the words of that lousy boss? He almost stood up and walked in circles. Where did this woman come from? Does anyone know her? Yes, this woman's origin is unknown. I am afraid that she is a spy from another world. Yes, the boss of the shop is from the underworld. He has been running the shop here for 3 to 5 years, and has never done anything bad. Although the way he made these white jade dolls is strange, he did it for the good of everyone. Unlike this woman, I don't know where she came from. Yes, she tried her best to destroy these life-saving white jade dolls. She must have bad intentions. There were loud complaints from the crowd. Once there were more people, they were afraid that there would be people with bad intentions. Chapter 22:17. There were loud questions from the crowd. When there were too many people, they were afraid that there would be people who would incite them. Once they were incited, they would easily follow blindly and become agitated. They would gang up and attack. Who knew what kind of brainless things they would do in a fit of anger? Now, Ning Xuema was in such an environment. Some of the more simple-minded and hot-tempered people were about to throw rotten eggs at Ning Xuema. Especially those who had lost their children, they had nowhere to vent their anger. Now that they were hot-headed, a few of them had already rolled up their sleeves and rushed forward. Get out of our netherworld. Kill this evil woman. Carrying poles, clubs, kitchen knives, all kinds of household utensils were thrown at Ning Xuema. Ning Xuema's eyes flashed. She raised her hand and was about to do something. Suddenly a child pushed through the crowd and rushed in. Don't hurt her. She is my aunt. She is not a bad person. Xiaochen. That child was Xiaochen. When Ning Xuema was making a ruckus in the jade shop, this child had been hiding in the crowd. People had almost forgotten about his existence. Now that he suddenly rushed out, he wanted to use his small body to block those sticks and kitchen knives. With his small body, it would only take a few hits to kill him. Especially the kitchen knife that was flying towards him. It just so happened that it was flying towards his head. Ning Xuema's wrist rotated and a light green light flashed, enveloping herself and the child. Those weapons seemed to have fallen into a swamp as they instantly melted and disappeared without a trace. That child seemed to have been frightened. His little face was deathly pale as he threw himself into Ning Xuema's embrace. Aunt, however, when he was less than a foot away from her, he seemed to have met with some kind of obstacle and couldn't rush forward anymore. He opened his two small hands and looked at Ning Xuema with a pair of big eyes. Be obedient and stand here. Ning Xuema smiled faintly and no longer paid attention to him. Her sudden display of power also deterred the group of people who wanted to make a move. Only then did the crowd remember that this woman's kung fu was actually very amazing. It belonged to the category of kung fu that could kill people in minutes. Those who wanted to make a move had cold sweat on their foreheads and regretted their recklessness. They were afraid of Ning Xuema's revenge, so they all stepped back. Everyone, don't listen to her. If she has such good kung fu, why is she dressed like a peasant woman? She must be a spy from another world. She wants to harm the children of the netherworld, so she tried every possible way to destroy these white jade dolls. Your Majesty, since you have such a precious jar, please make more dolls to give them to the children who haven't bought them yet. The children's safety is most important. Yelled from the crowd. His voice immediately attracted the response of the people around him. Everyone asked the Nether King to hurry up and give the order to make more babies. Especially the parents who hadn't gotten their hands on the white jade dolls. They couldn't help but squeeze forward, wanting to snatch the jar that was spinning on Ning Xuema's fingertips. Ning Xuema narrowed her eyes slightly as if she had finally confirmed something. She pinched her fingers together and was about to make a move. Suddenly there was a scream from the crowd. A person flew up from the ground as if he had been set up. Something seemed to be pulling him and he flew straight toward the blood-red coffin. The person was waving his arms and legs. The closer he got to the coffin, the paler his face became. When his body was finally hanging above the coffin and about to fall, he finally shouted, "Help! No, no." Chapter 22:18. The shopkeeper's expression also changed. He took 2 steps forward and was about to pull that person down. Ning Xuema was smart. Once she saw this scene, her heart was moved. She held the stick horizontally and blocked the shopkeeper's path. "What are you doing?" The shopkeeper's face turned pale. He finally said, "He will fall into the coffin. If he falls in, then so be it. Your coffin doesn't eat people. What are you afraid of?" The shopkeeper was speechless. His face turned even paler, but he couldn't find any words to refute. The person who was hanging above the coffin obviously knew the inside story. Seeing that his body was about to fall into the coffin, he was so scared that he almost peed his pants. "No, no, save me." It was as if he wasn't in the coffin, but a purgatory that ate people. The Nether King's expression changed. He waved his hand to stop the soldiers who wanted to save him. He looked at the person coldly. That was the one who had been inciting the crowd earlier. He was controlled by an inexplicable force. He tried his best to break free, but he couldn't. He could only watch as his body sank into the coffin inch by inch. The moment his feet touched the bottom of the coffin, he let out a muffled groan that was obviously painful to the extreme, but his mouth was covered by a hand. Everyone watched helplessly as his body sank into the coffin and turned into a pool of blood. Everyone was stunned. They all retreated. Ning Xuema didn't expect the blood coffin to be so vicious. Her expression also changed. What is going on? The Nether King's gaze was like a sharp arrow, shooting at the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper's face was as pale as death. I don't know. Maybe someone is playing tricks. You still dare to quibble. Do you really think that I can be fooled? Take him down. This time all the soldiers didn't have any doubts. They immediately took the shopkeeper down. The Nether King sneered. This blood coffin belongs to you. If you don't know, who knows? Men, throw him into the blood coffin. Let him personally check if there is anything strange about this blood coffin. The soldiers immediately lifted the shopkeeper up and walked toward the blood coffin. The shopkeeper was so scared that he screamed like a pig being slaughtered. "Spare me! Spare me!" The Netherworld King couldn't help but look at Ning Xuema. Ning Xuema's face was slightly pale. Her gaze was fixed in one direction, and her figure suddenly rose up, falling into the crowd like a shooting star. Because of her attack just now, most people were still a little afraid of her. When they saw her flying over, they scattered like birds and beasts. Ning Xuema didn't care at all. Her eyes were anxiously looking around as if she was looking for something. However, she was disappointed. She didn't find anything there. She was standing at the place where the man who had been thrown out by an unknown force was standing. However, there was nothing but blue stones in that place. Unwilling to give up, she squatted down as if she was sniffing the air, but there was nothing. She slowly got up and pursed her lips. Was she seeing things? The ray of light she saw when the man was thrown out was very familiar. It seemed to have come from Xinjiuli. Could it be that she missed him so much that she was hallucinating? She stood there in a daze. She acted as if she didn't hear the Nether King's questions. The Nether King naturally didn't want to throw the shopkeeper into the blood coffin. He still wanted to dig out the real culprit from this person's mouth. The shopkeeper was really a hard bone to chew. At this point he was still stubborn. Chapter 22:19. The shop owner was a tough nut to crack. Even at this stage he was still stubborn. "Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Even if the blood coffin is evil, I didn't harm anyone. The white jade doll didn't harm anyone and saved many children. Your Majesty, if you do this, the people will be disappointed." The onlookers looked at each other. Many of them were the kind of people who wouldn't cry until they saw the coffin. They also said, "Your Majesty, the white jade doll didn't harm anyone. Although the method is evil, it's good for the children." "Yes, yes, Your Majesty. Don't hurt the good people. Your Majesty, we don't need to care about the evil aura of the blood coffin. We should keep the jar. Make more dolls and distribute them to the children first so that everyone can be at ease." The Nether King frowned. His people were afraid of losing their children. They wanted to grab a straw whenever they saw one, regardless of whether the straw was poisonous or not. Ning Xuema also came back to her senses. She was speechless when she heard what these people said. How can the white jade doll made with evil magic have protective effects? Did you bring your brains out? How can you believe such nonsense? If this doll is a kind of evil thing that can control people, and the person behind it deliberately steals the children who have never bought the white jade doll in order to control more children, and then spreads rumors in the city, creating the illusion that only those who buy the white jade doll can be safe, then what will you do? Everyone should know that some people would use a medium to control people unknowingly when they were refining sorcery or casting black magic. If I'm not wrong, this white jade doll is the medium. The person behind it wants to control all the children in Nether City. So, not only can we not make more white jade dolls, but we also want the people who have bought them to smash them and destroy them. After Ning Xuema finished speaking, even the Nether King broke out in a cold sweat. He immediately ordered the people in the city to hand in the white jade dolls. At this moment, more than half of the onlookers had already bought the dolls. They were still skeptical and hesitated to hand them over. Some people even wanted to hide the white jade dolls. Ning Xuema looked at the people's expressions and knew that they wouldn't be happy to hand in the white jade dolls. She raised her eyebrows. It seemed that she had to use a strong medicine. She flew up and landed beside the shopkeeper. With a leap, she stood at the edge of the blood coffin, making the shopkeeper's head look down. She said coldly, "I'll count to 3. If you don't tell me the truth, I'll throw you in." Her tone was awe-inspiring, and no one dared to doubt the authenticity of her words. The shopkeeper was so scared that his face turned pale, but he still refused to admit it. Ning Xuema didn't pay any attention to him. After counting to 3, she directly let go. The shopkeeper screamed and fell into the coffin. When his head was about to hit the bottom of the coffin, Ning Xuema picked him up again. Her voice was colder than ice. "I'll give you one more chance. Tell me who's behind you. Tell me the effects of this doll." The shopkeeper was so scared that he almost wet his pants. Ning Xuema was like a female Azura, so he didn't dare to argue anymore. He closed his eyes and said, Okay, I'll tell you, I'm a jade craftsman in this city. A few days ago, someone came to find me and rented my place. He asked me to sell these white jade dolls and said that all the money would belong to me. I was greedy for this small profit, so I started to sell them. I don't know what these white jade dolls are for, Chapter 22:20. Liar. If you don't know, how do you know how to guard against this blood coffin? It's that person who reminded me in advance that I must not fall into the blood coffin. Otherwise there will be nothing left of me. What about those lost children? Where are they? I don't know. The shopkeeper's eyes flickered. Ning Xuema sneered. It seems that if I don't give you a taste of pain, you won't know your limits. Ning Xuema hit his back with her hand. The shopkeeper's body trembled violently, and he screamed, sweating profusely. After a while, the shopkeeper finally couldn't endure the torture and finally told the truth. I don't know about the children who were lost a few days ago, but the children who were lost in the past 2 days all automatically threw themselves into this blood coffin. It was earth-shattering. The onlookers were silent. Suddenly they clamored like a pot of boiling water. Those who had lost their children roared and pushed with all their might, wanting to tear the shopkeeper apart. The Nether King was also furious. Scum. You actually colluded with outsiders to harm people in the same world. Tell me, who ordered you to do such a despicable thing? Also, how many of your companions are in the crowd? Tell me all of them. If you don't tell me the truth, I'll cut you into pieces. The shopkeeper closed his eyes. I was forced to do it. The person behind it is the Devil Master. This sentence was like a bomb, causing the crowd to explode again. Everyone was filled with righteous indignation, and the people couldn't stop cursing. Ning Xuema didn't panic. She just sneered. How do you know that the person behind it is the Devil Master? Did you see her with your own eyes? The shopkeeper gritted his teeth and nodded. She ordered me personally, so I didn't dare to disobey. What does the Devil Master look like? She is dressed in red and is very beautiful. Ning Xuema smiled again. Everyone on Earth knows this. It doesn't count. Don't you think you can lie without a draft? The Nether King frowned. Lady, how do you know that he is lying? Ning Xuema looked up and smiled. It's very simple. Because I am the Devil Master. Suddenly a red light flashed around him. A moment later, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The ordinary-looking woman had disappeared and was replaced by a beautiful woman in a fiery red dress. The beautiful woman's black hair fluttered in the wind, and the cinnabar mole on her forehead was as red as blood. She floated there and looked at the shopkeeper coldly. When did I order you to do this? The shopkeeper was tongue-tied. His face was ashen and he couldn't say anything. The Netherworld King was also dumbfounded. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and hurriedly led the civil and military officials to bow down. Greetings, Demon Lord. Ning Xuema's gaze swept across the crowd. After being dumbfounded for a moment, the onlookers all knelt down. At this point, everyone naturally understood that the shopkeeper was lying. If the Devil Lord was the mastermind behind this matter, he would not have spent so much effort to expose it now. The Nether King was furious. He shouted at the shopkeeper, "Are you still not going to tell the truth? Aren't you afraid that I will execute your entire family?" The shopkeeper was speechless. The person who ordered me to do this is... Before he could finish his sentence, a black light flashed and shot toward the back of his head like lightning. The black light came so fast that no one could react in time. Just as the black light was about to pierce the back of the shopkeeper's head, a red light blocked it. The black light and red light collided in the air. With a ding sound, the black light shattered and the red light disappeared. Someone wanted to silence him. Chapter 22:21. However, the angle of the black light was very tricky. Even though there were so many pairs of eyes present, they did not see where the black light came from. If not for Ning Xuema's quick reflexes, the shopkeeper would have died on the spot. The shopkeeper managed to survive, but he was so scared that his face turned pale. The Netherworld King had already ordered his men to investigate the origin of the black light. Ning Xuema just smiled and said, "Your Majesty, there are still a few good friends of that person hiding in the crowd. Let's ask them to come out first." From the scene just now, the Netherworld King could see that this incident was not done by one person. There must be a group. However, if he interrogated the shopkeeper now, he was afraid that he would not be able to get anything out of him. While he was thinking, Ning Xuema had already used her long whip. There were a few screams in the crowd. After a while, 7 or 8 people were pulled out by Ning Xuema's long whip and fell to the ground in a sorry state. "Tie them up," Ning Xuema ordered. The Netherworld King trusted Ning Xuema very much at this moment. He ordered his men to tie the 7 or 8 people up like rice dumplings. Naturally, the 7 or 8 people cried out for their innocence. However, before they could say anything, Ning Xuema sealed their acupoints. How do you know that this is the thief? The Netherworld King could not help but ask. Ning Xuema smiled and said, of course I know. She had been enduring the insults of the people just now because she wanted to find the thief. These people were too careless. They thought that they could impersonate the people without anyone noticing. However, they did not expect that Ning Xuema had already noticed them and remembered them. At this moment they were caught with a thunderous strike. Ning Xuema was too lazy to interrogate them one by one. She smiled and said, among you who is the most sensible and can tell me who is the mastermind, I will spare your life. The rest of you will be thrown into the blood coffins. The people who were tied up changed their expressions. They started to whimper but they could not say anything. Ning Xuema continued, I don't have the patience. I don't feel like listening to your lies and arguments. The moment I open your acupoints, whoever points out the mastermind first will be spared. As for the rest, hee. This chuckle made the hairs on their bodies stand on end. Ning Xuema smiled again. I'll count to 3. You have to seize this rare opportunity yourselves. She counted one by one, making those people extremely nervous. When she counted to 3, she flicked her finger and actually unsealed those people's acupoints in a split second. Him. 6 or 7 arms pointed at one person. It was as if they were afraid of falling behind. Everyone naturally looked over as well. There was a child standing there. Your Majesty, be careful. Someone shouted. At the same time, a streak of blue light shot towards the Nether King. The speed of the blue light was too fast, and the guards around the Netherworld King didn't even have time to react. The Netherworld King's hand lightened, and the jar was actually snatched away by someone. At the same time, several streaks of black light shot towards the people lying on the ground who had confessed, nailing them to death on the spot. Ning Xuema actually had time to stop them, but she didn't do it. These people were probably that person's accomplices. The missing children were probably also their doing. They owed blood. Now that they confessed in order to survive, even if they survived in the future, they might not do good deeds. Now that they died in the hands of their master, they deserved it. And she did not break her promise? Ha! Interesting. The streak of blue light shot up to the sky and stopped in mid-air. Chapter 22:22. Everyone looked up and saw that the blue light was a boy in blue clothes. With one hand holding the jug, he lowered his eyes and looked down, as if he was a king overlooking all living things. This deity worked so hard to set up this trap. I didn't expect that someone would see through it so quickly. Little Xuema, you're very smart. Ning Xuema looked up at the boy she named Xiaochen. You're Luo Jiuchen. The boy chuckled. That's right. However, I managed to hide it from you this time. Little Xuema, this time you spoiled my plans again. What should I do to you? I wanted to get 30,000 hearts, but now, I can only take 4,800. His palm suddenly pressed on the edge of the jar, and circles of purple light appeared in his palm. Throw the white jade doll away. Throw the white jade doll away. Many people in the crowd began to yell. Those who were holding on to the white jade doll hurriedly threw it away. There were also experts who shouted, don't let him use his sorcery. Kill him. Countless magic weapons flashed and smashed towards the boy. They wanted to stop him. However, there seemed to be a barrier around the boy, and those magic weapons couldn't hit him at all. The boy laughed, and his smile was indescribably proud and sinister. It's useless. All the children whose birth characters are carved on the white jade doll are my sacrifices. It's useless to smash the doll. Just wait for your children's hearts to fly out automatically. His words made those who bought the white jade doll pale, and some of them almost collapsed. The Nether King glared at the boy. Lord Luo, I didn't do anything wrong to you. Why do you have to scheme against my people? Stop it. Stop it. The boy stood motionless in midair. So many people attacked him and so many magic weapons circled around him, but none of them could stop him. Not a single magic weapon could hit him. They could only watch in despair as he activated the jar. Everyone knew that once the jar was truly activated, it would be the moment of death for those children. Everyone was so anxious that their eyes turned red, but there was nothing they could do. The boy seemed to be enjoying everyone's reaction. His gaze turned and landed on Ning Xuema, who was standing there quietly. Little Xuema, you're very calm. You actually didn't come up to fight with me? Could it be that you're angry because these people misunderstood you and insulted you? That's right. You've been trying to save them, but they don't know what's good for them. They always misunderstand you. I feel sorry for you. It's only right that you don't care about them. His voice was still that of a child's and his words were full of provocation. He seemed to be joking, but it suppressed all the noise below. Every word was clear. The people of the underworld were stunned for a while. Then they all blushed and lowered their heads. Ning Xuema chuckled. Do you think I didn't stop you because of their misunderstanding? The boy raised his eyebrows. Could it be that there's another reason? He looked down and thought for a while. Could it be? You finally like me so you don't have the heart to kill me? His voice sounded like a joke but also a little serious. Little Xuema, this is the first time you've been so nice to me. I'll repay you well. Although he kept talking, his hands did not stop moving. Countless spells were released from his fingertips, and they were used on the jar in his palm. Chapter 22-23. All of a sudden the jar lit up. The boy's eyes also lit up slightly. However, before he could reveal a happy expression, the jar suddenly broke with a pop. 10 small bones fell out of the jar and turned into dust before they hit the ground. Even the jar fell into the dust. The boy, the nervous crowd, the boy's eyes fell on Ning Xuema's face. Did you do this? Ning Xuema crossed her arms and looked at him, her smile unchanged. What do you think? The boy gritted his teeth. When did you break it? Why didn't I see it? Ning Xuema's smile became fainter and she said, guess? The boy, when the crowd heard the conversation between the two people, they all breathed a sigh of relief. Especially those with children, they breathed a sigh of relief for a long time. It turned out that the Devil Master had broken this strange jar in advance. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Ning Xuema still had that indifferent expression on her face, but she sneered in her heart. Since she found this jar to be so evil, how could she allow it to be intact? After the Nether King had finished his examination, she had already secretly broken the items in the jar, causing the jar to crack slightly. If she didn't use her magic power, the jar wouldn't break, but if she used it quickly, the jar would definitely break. When she made her move, everyone's attention was on the shop owner who was being forced to confess. Her movements were so light that no one noticed. Even the Netherworld King who had been holding the jar didn't notice. The boy's eyes were like needles, almost nailing Ning Xuema. Little Xuema, I still underestimated you. The Sky Splitter sword slowly appeared in Ning Xuema's hand. She smiled lightly. Really? I think you need to get to know me. She quickly rose into the air, her red dress fluttering in the wind, making her look like she was glowing. Luo Jiuchen, it's time to settle the score between you and me. Luo Jiuchen also smiled gently. Little Xuema, do you think you are my opponent now? Ning Xuema sighed. Compared to you, my current martial arts is still a bit lacking. That's why I used a little method. Luo Jiuchen suddenly had a bad feeling. What method? Ning Xuema didn't say anything. Instead, she formed a seal with her fingers and chanted an unknown incantation. Luo Jiuchen suddenly felt his body tighten. Rays of red light suddenly shot out from the blue trousers and enveloped his entire body like a spider web. In the blink of an eye, the red light seeped into his flesh. Luo Jiuchen was tied up like a dumpling in an instant. He swayed in the air and almost fell to the ground. However, his kung fu was indeed impressive. Even after being tied up like this, he was still able to stand in the air and not fall. The other Netherworld soldiers and Netherworld generals' Dharma artifacts could not even get close to him. His eyes widened and his face was full of disbelief. You actually did something to the clothes. You recognized me at that time? Ning Xuema curled her lips. I just had some doubts. She was not a person who believed people easily, especially at this moment. Almost every step was a trap, so she had to be more careful. At first, she didn't have much defense against this child. After all, this child didn't have any aura of Luo Jiuchen. This child was not transformed by Luo Jiuchen, but by the possession technique. It was a very special technique that no one could detect. Chapter 22-24. After talking with the child, she became suspicious, but she couldn't be sure. It was true that she had bought clothes for the child, but it was also true that she had put a binding spell in them. If the child had always been an ordinary person, then the binding spell wouldn't have been activated, and the clothes would have been ordinary and luxurious. But once the child played tricks, as long as she chanted the spell, the clothes would become a demon-binding rope. Once trapped, no matter how powerful a demon was, he wouldn't be able to break free. The demon-binding rope cut into his flesh, and Luo Jiuchen's white baby face showed a trace of pain. He looked at Ning Xuema with watery eyes and suddenly said softly, Little Shuema, do you know why I didn't throw away the skin bag and return to my original body? He looked down at the blue clothes on his body. Because this set of clothes is the only thing you bought for me. Even if I know it's arsenic, I can't bear to throw it away. Ning Shuema, Luo Jiuchen looked at her with a pair of deep and serene eyes. Little Shuema, you see, you've harmed me so many times, but I still want to treat you well. Can't you be a little gentler to me? Ning Shuema smiled. Of course I can be gentler to you. The demon-binding rope had cut into his flesh, but Ning Shuema continued to cast spells as if she was afraid it wasn't enough. The rope was getting tighter and faster. This demon-binding rope could not only bind the body, but also the demon soul inside, so he couldn't escape easily. Luo Jiuchen had been possessed by the demon, so this thing was very useful for him. Ning Shuema knew that his kung fu was high, so once she tied him up, she would naturally tighten it to death, for fear that it wouldn't be tight enough and painful enough. Luo Jiuchen's body was almost twisted into a fried dough twist, but he sighed softly. What a cruel little girl. However, I'm not someone you can use this thing to trap. Speaking up to this point, his body suddenly emitted a golden light. As the golden light flashed past, the blood-red demon-binding rope seemed to have encountered a strong acid and immediately turned into nothingness. He somersaulted in the air, and a human-shaped light golden shadow appeared above his head. The shadow swayed slightly and disappeared in the air, leaving behind a long laugh. Little Shuema, you are indeed capable. I like you even more now. However, I still have other plans. Take your time to savor it. Ning Shuema's expression changed. She raised her hand and released a red light to stop him, but the shadow disappeared too quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was gone. She couldn't stop him at all. The other experts in the underworld who reacted quickly also made their moves. However, their moves were like fishing for the moon in the water. They couldn't even catch a trace of his shadow. However, the child's body fell from the sky and landed on the ground, motionless. The commoners were stunned for a moment before they finally reacted. Those who had lost their children were filled with anger. They all ran forward, wanting to tear the child's body apart to vent their anger. Ning Shuema raised her hand. Wherever the red light passed, everyone was forced to step back. At this moment, these people had completely believed in Ning Shuema and were full of respect for her. Seeing that she had helped the child, they all looked at her in surprise. Ning Shuema said lightly, "He is innocent. He was just possessed by Luo Jiuchen. You don't have to vent your anger on him." She looked at the child and her expression darkened slightly. His eyes were tightly closed and he was already dead. This child was supposed to be a genius. His bones were exquisite, and his appearance was especially delicate. Chapter 22-25. He was supposed to be a talented young man with a delicate appearance. However, he was possessed by Luo Jiuchen, and even his soul was devoured. Ning Shuema could not detect any trace of soul in him. The younger the child, the purer his soul was, and the easier it was for him to be possessed. Especially with such a good body, once he was possessed, his kung fu would increase exponentially. Since the child was dead, his body could not be kept in case Luo Jiuchen used it again. Ning Shuema simply burned it. "Hey, why is there fog?" Someone in the crowd exclaimed. "God, what is that?" Someone else exclaimed. "God, there is also fog over there. It's white." Everyone was startled. They all looked in the direction of the voice and their expressions changed. Ning Shuema also raised her head and looked around. Her expression couldn't help but change. Four-colored fog. There was fog in all four directions of the street, and it was fog of different colors. Red, black, white, and green were rushing over from four different directions at high speed. Panicked shouts could be heard from the streets. Countless people were being chased by the fog and were running in this direction. At the same time, the ground under their feet began to shake violently, as if there was a magnitude 8 earthquake. What was going on? What was going on? The people were shaken to the ground and they were all in a panic. There were screams, cries, and calls for children. The trembling of the earth finally stopped, and the people who were rolling around on the ground were still in shock. After a while they got up and looked around. Then they were stunned. Everything familiar around them had changed. The shops, the streets, the stone workshop, everything had disappeared without a trace. What appeared in front of them was a square so huge that it seemed to have no end. There were 4 passageways around the square, and each passageway had fog of a different color surging out. The fog in the south was red, the fog in the north was white, the fog in the west was black, and the fog in the east was green. The color of each fog was very pure. They were red like fire, white like snow, black like ink and green like jade. Some people were lying near the passages because of the tremor. When they opened their eyes, they found that the fog was close. They wanted to get up, but it was too late. Miserable screams rose and fell, almost piercing one's eardrums. Everyone subconsciously looked towards the source of the voice, their bodies trembling non-stop. The dozens of people who were engulfed by the red mist seemed to have been splashed with a layer of kerosene. They burned fiercely, causing them to roll on the ground and turn into a pile of ashes in the blink of an eye. The people who were swept by the white mist were instantly covered in a thick layer of ice. They were still running for their lives, but they were instantly frozen into ice sculptures. It was a very strange sight. As for those who were swept by the black fog, they looked even more frightening. When they were swept by the fog, they were human, but when they ran out, the flesh on their bodies shrank rapidly. After running for a dozen steps, they turned into skeletons and directly fell to the ground. Only the people who were attacked by the green fog were still alive and kicking. They were shouting and screaming as if there was a ghost chasing after them. But before they could reach the center of the square, they suddenly screamed and disappeared without a trace. The Netherworld King and his subordinates were all in the middle of the plaza. When the earthquake happened, these Netherworld race generals had protected the Netherworld King in the center. In addition, there was no danger in the center of the square, so they didn't suffer many casualties. Chapter 22-26. The civil servants were in a miserable state. Their faces were all swollen and their robes were all messed up. The Netherworld generals were well trained. They formed a semicircle, protecting the Netherworld King and the civil servants. They looked around cautiously. The suffering of the surrounding commoners was naturally seen by everyone, and all of them were shocked. How did we get here? What is that fog? Where is the safest place? This was the question that was hovering in everyone's mind, and the sufferings of the people who had been affected by the fog indirectly served as a weather vane for everyone. The green fog was the safest place. 4 types of fog were approaching them from all directions. Your Majesty, the green fog in the east is the safest place. Let's go there. The Netherworld Prime Minister reported. This square was not safe. Once the fog forced them to the front, everyone would die. Hence, they had to make a decision as soon as possible and hide in a safer place. The Netherworld King looked around. Where is the Devil Master? I am here. A voice sounded not far away. The Netherworld King looked over and saw Ning Xuema standing in the east where the commoners had fallen. She was looking down. There was a huge crack in the north-south direction. The 2 ends of the crack were covered by red and white fog. Hence, if they wanted to reach the passage in the east, they had to cross the crack. The crack was very deep and the bottom could not be seen. Black and white fog swirled below. The commoners who had fallen into the crack were nowhere to be seen. The crack was more than 100 feet wide. Unless they could fly, they would not be able to reach the passage in the green fog. The commoners in the square saw that the green fog did not eat them, so they instinctively ran to the east. However, they were blocked by the crack. They could not jump over it all. They were so anxious that they walked around the crack. The scene was very chaotic. The Netherworld King saw that Ning Xuema was still there, and he calmed down. Devil Master, what is happening? Ning Xuema sighed. If I am not wrong, Luo Jiuqin should have set up an array in the entire Netherworld city. The earthquake just now was a sign that the array was activated. We have fallen into his array. The commoners in the Netherworld realm looked at each other. What array was so powerful? It could bring so many people in. The Nether King had already noticed that there were a total of 10,000 people trapped in the plaza. Does the Devil Master recognize this array? The Netherworld King looked at Ning Xuema with hope. Ning Xuema shook her head slowly. This is also the first time I've seen it. She didn't expect that Luo Jiuqin was also an array master. No wonder he said he had other plans before leaving. So this was the reason. She looked at the 4-colored fog that was slowly approaching her, and her brain quickly calculated. According to the current speed, the fog would converge in the center of the square within an hour, and it would be difficult to predict what would happen at that time. Naturally, there was no lack of such scheming experts in the Netherworld realm. He immediately asked the Netherworld King for instructions. Your Majesty, we must leave this place quickly. Otherwise, we won't be able to escape in an hour. Naturally, the Netherworld King also saw the danger of this place. Now, the only direction they could escape to was the eastern green fog. It was fine for him and a group of military generals to fly over this fissure, but what about the ordinary citizens and the group of civil officials? Leave them all here to die? Devil Master, do you have a way to break this array? The Netherworld King put all his hope on Ning Xuema. Ning Xuema looked at the fissure under her feet and then looked at the passage of green fog on the opposite side. She felt that the passage of green fog was not so simple. She was afraid that there was a bigger trap waiting for them to jump into. Chapter 22-27. She took a deep breath and said, "Your Majesty, please retreat to the center of the square and form a defensive formation. I will go over there to take a look." She flew over the Rift Valley and disappeared into the thick green fog. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing if they should believe her or not. However, the Netherworld King immediately ordered all the civilians and officials to retreat to the center of the square, with hundreds of generals as guards. He led more than 10 generals to the Rift Valley, discussing ways to cross the Rift Valley and doing various experiments. First, they used their psychokinesis to create tall trees to build a bridge. However, before the big tree could reach the other side, a ball of fire rushed up from the Rift Valley and burned the big tree to ashes. Then they used their psychokinesis to condense iron bars to build an iron bridge. However, there was not much iron in the air, so the iron bars they condensed were at most 10 feet long. They could not reach the other side at all. The Netherworld King was trying his best to build a bridge when a scream came from behind. "Your Majesty! Your Majesty!" The Netherworld King turned back and realized that other than the green fog, the other 3 colors of fog were approaching the square. As there were too many people in the square, it was inevitable that some people were standing at the periphery. The fog was about to invade the civilians in the outermost circle. The civilians were scared out of their wits and tried to squeeze into the center. The soldiers in the center were still protecting the civil and military officials. Naturally, they formed a human wall to prevent the civilians from rushing in. Both sides were in conflict. Children were crying, adults were screaming, and it was a mess. There were also some civilians who saw that they could not rush in, so they ran towards the Rift Valley. There were so many of them that the Netherworld King was almost squeezed into the Rift Valley. The people around the Netherworld King were naturally experts. They immediately protected the Netherworld King in the center and drove away the civilians who were rushing in. Once a crowd formed in an environment, many people would not be able to control themselves. Many people escaped to the edge of the Rift Valley with great difficulty, but when the people behind rushed in, the people at the front could not stand still and immediately fell into the Rift Valley like dumplings. The long screams pierced through the air, making people's hearts tremble with fear. The Netherworld King's face turned pale, and he immediately ordered the soldiers to stop the civilians who were rushing forward. However, under the shadow of death, how many people could rationally line up according to the Netherworld King's order? The fog on the 3 sides was getting closer and closer, leaving less and less space for the civilians. People at the periphery were attacked by the fog from time to time, and they were either turned into fireballs, ice sculptures, or skeletons. The crowd was filled with cries as if it was the end of the world. The situation was about to spiral out of control. "Your Majesty, you must make a decision as soon as possible. I will escort Your Majesty there first. It may be dangerous there, but it is better than waiting for death here. Your Majesty, we can't wait for that Devil Master any longer. She might have already found a way to survive and escaped." "That's right. She's the Devil Master after all, and we've misunderstood her before. Young Master even sent troops to attack Imo Palace. It's good enough that she didn't hit us when we're down. Why would she be willing to put in the effort to save us from the underworld?" The Netherworld generals all spoke up, trying to persuade the Netherworld King to bring his men over first. Under the shadow of death, if the Netherworld King didn't leave, these Netherworld generals wouldn't dare to move first. Naturally, they urged the Netherworld King on. The Nether King's face was also pale. He could pass, but what about the commoners? What about the hundreds of civil officials? All destroyed here? The civil officials and commoners were also afraid that their king would completely abandon them. They looked at him anxiously, some shouting, some crying, "Your Majesty, when the time is right, we need to cut our losses." The underworld marshal finally spoke up. Chapter 22-28. The Netherworld King closed his eyes and let out a long sigh. At this time he couldn't completely protect his people. He could only go first. Finally he nodded. The generals around him were overjoyed. They immediately rose into the air and landed on the other side of the river while protecting him. The other generals and soldiers who knew how to fly naturally flew up and followed them to the other side of the river. They left the soldiers, officials, and people with low or no skills to wait on the other side of the valley to be devoured. The Netherworld King flew into the air. He heard the desperate cries of the people behind him. His heart twisted and he almost tripped and fell. Fortunately, he was stopped by the generals beside him. At this moment in the huge square, there was only a small area that wasn't invaded by the colorful fog. The people on both sides couldn't squeeze in, and they were forced to do so by the colorful fog. In desperation, they voluntarily jumped into the valley. The cries behind them were so loud that even the fog was trembling. When the Netherworld King landed on the other side of the river, his legs almost went soft. He wanted to look back, but the generals beside him were afraid that he would be soft-hearted. They directly surrounded him and ran toward the passage of green fog. Suddenly, a red shadow flashed in the green fog. A woman finally appeared and blocked the path of the Netherworld King and his people. The Netherworld King and his people were stunned. The Devil Master. She finally came back. The moment Ning Xuema appeared, she roughly saw the situation here. Her beautiful face darkened. "Your Majesty, are you going to abandon your people and run away by yourself?" Her voice was so cold that it could freeze. The Netherworld King's face was pale. "I can't bear it, but, there is no but. If you still want to save your people, follow me." Ning Xuema turned and flew to the other side of the river. "The Devil Master is here. The Devil Master is here to save us. Oh my God, it's really the Devil Master. She must be here to save us. Devil Master, save us." When the desperate people on the other side of the river saw the red-clothed Devil Master, they immediately shouted. Some people were so excited that they almost screamed until their throats cracked. Seeing Ning Xuema jump to the other side of the river to save his people without hesitation, the Lord of the Netherworld was also stunned. "Your Majesty, without the bridge, those people can't cross at all. Even if you go back with the Devil Lord, it won't help. We should go first." A general saw that the Netherworld King had stopped. He was afraid that the Netherworld King would rush back in a fit of anger, so he hurriedly said. At this moment, there were about 100 generals by the Nether King's side. Naturally, there were some who agreed with that general. The Nether King swept his gaze across the generals. "What do you all think?" Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what to say. Marshal Lung from the underworld bowed to the King of Hell and said, "Your Majesty, you shouldn't put yourself in danger. Your Majesty, please go first. I have to save my subordinates, so I can't protect your Majesty anymore." After saying that, he stood up and turned to leave. He flew to the other side of the river with Ning Xuema. Nether King Erha clenched his fists. He suddenly turned around and walked back the way he came. The other generals by his side tried to persuade him to stop. The Nether King took a deep breath, and his eyes gradually turned red. He said word by word, "I am the Lord of the Underworld, and the people on the other side of the river are my people. I can't abandon them." He flew to the other side of the river without caring about those generals. Those generals looked at each other. Even their king didn't care about the danger and flew over. How could they be cowards? Chapter 22-29. Therefore, most of the generals flew back as well. Only a few of them stayed behind. They had finally escaped from the dangerous place, so how could they be willing to go back? They stood there for a moment, then suddenly turned around and ran toward the green fog. They were smart people, so they would not associate themselves with a lunatic who was stupid enough to die despite knowing the danger. Ning Xuema's arrival was like a shot in the arm, making the desperate people cheer. Some of them even had tears in their eyes. In this kind of urgent situation, Ning Xuema naturally didn't want to waste time talking nonsense. She only said a few words. "I will take you there, but you must follow my orders. Those who disobey will be thrown into the fog." All the people agreed loudly. Ning Xuema immediately ordered these people to line up in 10 rows. The old, the weak, the women, and the children were in the middle, while the strong people who knew spells stood at the periphery. Ning Xuema turned around and looked at the Netherworld King. "Your Majesty, if you want to save your people, please stand at the end of the line, and the generals, please stand at the outermost line." Now, the end of the line and the outermost line on both sides were the most dangerous, because these 3 places were the first to be attacked by the colorful fog. The generals beside the Netherworld King opened their mouths to refuse, but the Netherworld King had already said in a deep voice, "Listen to the Devil Master's orders." He immediately assigned the guards to the outermost line, and he and 3 other generals went to the end of the line. This arrangement made all the people less anxious, and they finally had someone to rely on. At this moment, the fog was approaching the 3 sides of the line. Ning Xuema bit her index finger and drew a blood curse on the 2 sides and the end of the line. The blood curse flew into the air and imprinted on the soldiers and the Netherworld King at the outermost line. She immediately taught them a set of spells and asked them to recite it silently. At this moment of life and death, naturally, everyone displayed their greatest potential. In the blink of an eye they learned a set of curse techniques. As they cast the spell, their bodies emitted a faint red light, which actually formed a large enchantment, enveloping the entire team. Strangely, with this enchantment, the murderous fog could no longer rush over, and it only surged around the line. Everyone in the team heaved a sigh of relief. They had finally escaped the shadow of death for the time being. Everyone looked at Ning Xuema with gratitude. They were full of hope, as if they were looking at a god, waiting for her next order. Ning Xuema said in a deep voice, "This bounded domain can last for 2 hours. I will build a bridge within 1 hour. Everyone can line up to cross the bridge. There is plenty of time. Don't crowd and don't make any noise. Do you hear me?" "Yes, sir." A thunderous response. Only then did Ning Xuema turn around. Her finger pointed forward and countless jet-black vines with dark green leaves shot towards the opposite shore. The Netherworld King, who was at the back of the group, naturally saw it too. He couldn't help but say, "Devil Master, I also wanted to build a wooden bridge just now, but there was a mountain fire in the Rift Valley. As soon as the wooden bridge was completed, it was burned down." He didn't finish his sentence, because he saw that the vines shot out by Ning Xuema had already flown across the Rift Valley and wrapped around the rocks on the opposite shore. There was indeed a raging fire blowing out from the bottom of the Rift Valley. However, when the fire burned the vines, it was as if it had met water and was extinguished with a puff. Such a fire couldn't do anything to these vines. What kind of material were these vines made of? The Netherworld King was very surprised. Just now he had condensed more than a dozen kinds of wood, and some of them were especially fireproof. However, they were all burned to ashes by the fire blowing out from the Rift Valley. Chapter 2230. These vines were not afraid of fire? The Netherworld King was puzzled, but he also heaved a sigh of relief. As for the people of the underworld, when they saw Ning Xuema building a bridge from wood, their hearts were filled with admiration. The Devil Lord was indeed the Devil Lord. Her skills were extraordinary. As long as they followed her, they would definitely be able to escape. Unknowingly, these people had already regarded Ning Xuema as their backbone and followed her lead. Ning Xuema built the bridge very quickly. The vines flew back and forth in the air. Sure enough, in less than an hour, a green wooden bridge appeared on the Rift Valley. It was more than 6 feet wide and could allow 3 people to cross side by side at a time. After Ning Xuema finished building the bridge, she immediately let the women and children in the middle to cross the bridge first. Under her gaze, no one dared to cut the line or cause trouble. The people followed the order and crossed the vine bridge. They were also very fast. 7,000 to 8,000 people stepped on the bridge and reached the other side without landing on the ground. The Netherworld King and his generals were the last batch to arrive. They had been supporting the wizardry barrier and were a little tired at the moment, but everyone's eyes were shining. They were excited. Once everyone was on the shore, Ning Xuema opened her mouth. "This passage leads to a grassland. There are some mutated creatures roaming around there that are good at attacking people. Therefore it is not absolutely safe. After passing through the grassland, there is a deep and serene cave. I have already explored the cave and found that it is not dangerous for now. As for the other side of the cave, I did not explore it because I was in a hurry to come back. Maybe there is something very dangerous in the depths of the cave. Everything is unknown. Think about whether you want to stay here or follow me. It is all up to you." Actually, everyone had already seen that the Rift Valley seemed to have the effect of blocking the other fog. At this moment, the other colored fog had already surrounded the Rift Valley. They probably did not mix with each other. The 3 types of fog collided and made a sizzling sound like an object falling into a strong acid. Then they slowly surged toward the Rift Valley. They seemed to have met with obstacles on the other side of the Rift Valley. They could not pass through the Rift Valley. It might be safe to stay here, but it might also be dangerous because no one could be sure whether the 3 types of fog would eventually break through the barrier of the Rift Valley and rush here. There was unknown danger if they went forward, but they might be able to rush out of here alive. Staying where they were was temporarily safe. This kind of thing was not easy to decide. The crowd buzzed as they discussed the pros and cons of the 2 paths with their family and friends. The Nether King did not hesitate. He naturally chose to walk forward with Ning Xuema. After a while, the people present finally made a decision. Most of them chose to follow Ning Xuema. Even if it was risky, they would rather follow this demon master and charge in. Only a little over 100 chose to stay. Ning Xuemo rearranged the troops. The old, the weak, the women and the children were still in the middle, and the soldiers of the underworld were on all sides. She was at the front, and the Netherworld King and a few generals were at the back. The group of people entered the foggy passageway and gradually went far away. The remaining 100 or so people sat down where they were. They were also paying attention to the movements of the tricolored fog. If there were any abnormalities, it would not be too late for them to turn around and run. Once the people who were exploring in the front went out, they would definitely break the array. At that time they could follow the trail and escape safely. There was no need for them to take the risk. Now all they needed to do was to sit here and wait quietly. After about an hour, these people were completely enveloped by the soft green fog. They were not in a hurry to move. Chapter 22:31. There was no danger in the green mist, and the air was very fresh. Some people were already yawning in the green mist. And the sudden change happened in an instant. A buzzing sound came from the originally harmless green mist, as if a large swarm of bees was quickly approaching. Everyone opened their eyes and were scared out of their wits. Horrified screams came from the green mist. A moment later, the bodies of more than 100 people were covered with pine needles. They stood there like pine balls and blood dripped down from the pine needles. There was a sound of wind in the green mist, and a man in purple holding a folding fan appeared. He looked very handsome, and when he walked slowly, it was as if he was taking a stroll. He walked around the pine needles and the corner of his mouth hooked up. Only 120 people chose to stay and not go with her. That girl, her appeal is quite strong. He raised his hand and a purple light circled around the dead people, picking up countless translucent souls. Those souls struggled in the purple light, trying to escape. He licked his lips and sighed. Although the number is small, it's better than nothing. He took back the purple light, ignored the wailing of those souls and forced them into a small gray ball. Then he stuffed it into his mouth and swallowed it. A faint black gas came out of his body, circled around him and then scattered. He stood up and pursed his lips as if he was savoring the taste. After a moment he sighed. In the end there is not enough resentment. It's a pity that the girl ruined my plan. Otherwise all the children in the city would have been used by me and turned into little ghosts. Then they would have chased and killed their parents. Those parents who died in the hands of their children must have a lot of resentment. My martial arts would have improved even faster. Sigh, it's a pity. He shook his head but then smiled as if he thought of something. Since he had planned and arranged for so long, he would succeed in the end. These people would be his sooner or later and he would just have to spend a little effort. As for the girl, he wanted her to see with her own eyes that all the things she protected disappeared in his hands. He wanted her to see the day when he became the real ruler of the 6 realms. He would break all of her wings and make her blossom beneath him. When the streets of Ming City began to shake, the crystal ball in front of Shen Yanma began to tremble as well. The image was distorted, and the colors were almost indistinguishable. Little Yanma could not help but pat the crystal ball, trying to capture the image inside again. The crystal ball did not disappoint him. After a while the image finally stabilized. Little Yanma hurriedly looked at the crystal ball again, but it was as if he had been hit in the face. He was so shocked that he could not make a sound. The street was still the same and the shops on both sides of the street were still standing there. Even the blood-red coffin was still there, but the person was gone. Not only was he unable to see his mother again, even those noisy commoners, the majestic King Yama, the mischievous children, all of them had disappeared without a trace. Little Yanma did not give up. He tried to move the image around, but it was empty as far as the eye could see. There was not even a shadow in sight. What's going on? Even if the wind blew, it would not be so clean. Little Yanma was stunned for a moment. He could not help but turn around and say, "Hey Lord Lotus, look at this." He was about to ask her to look at what was going on, but he swallowed his words halfway. His pair of big eyes were wide open. "Who are you?" Chapter 22:32. The child who looked similar to him was no longer behind him. Instead, there was a young man in white who was meditating. The young man looked like he was about 12 or 13 years old. His silver hair was as white as snow, and his eyebrows were beautiful. He looked elegant as if he was carved out of ice. He was beautiful yet cold. There were faint layers of white light surrounding his body. The young man seemed to be awakened by little Yanma's voice. He slowly opened his eyes. His pair of deep blue eyes were like an ice lake. They looked straight into little Nianma's big eyes. The young man saw his own reflection in Nianma's clear eyes. He narrowed his eyes slightly. Nianma. His voice was no longer a child's voice. It was the cool and magnetic voice of a young man before he changed his voice. You. Little Nianma was so shocked that he could not speak. You are. The young man's appearance was very similar to his father. However, little Nianma's impression of his father was that of an adult. Although the young man's appearance was also extremely beautiful, there was a kind of neutral childlike innocence. The scene was too strange. Little Nianma could not react for a moment. After a while he finally said, Are you my brother? The young man originally reached out his hand to pat his big head, but he was stunned by his words. His fingers gently pressed on little Nianma's shoulder and said in a deep voice, Nianma, I am your father. Father. Little Nianma was stunned. His eyes were wide open, and his mouth was so wide that it seemed like an egg could be stuffed into it. The young man was naturally Shinjiuli, who had succeeded in his cultivation again. He raised his arm and hugged his son in his arms. He used his hand to close his little mouth. All right, kid, what did you see? What do you want me to see? As he said that, he looked into the crystal ball and saw an empty street. His expression changed slightly. What is going on? Little Nianma's mind was buzzing. He felt like he was struck by lightning. He could not react for a moment. At this time he subconsciously said, I don't know. Just now in the crystal ball, there was a sudden four-colored fog on the street. Then the image shook like an earthquake. When it stopped, there was no one in it. He was almost mechanically stating the facts. In the end he finally got some feeling. Is my mother okay? Where was she? He found it hard to say the word father. Shinjiuli stood up and patted little Nianma's head. Nianma, wait here obediently. I'll go save your mother. With a flash of white light, Shinjiuli's figure disappeared from the crystal cave. Little Nianma remained silent. He stood there in a daze, his mind still blank. The sudden ecstasy and bewilderment left him in a daze. It took him a while to react. His brain finally started working again. Father? This person was his father? His father was not dead. Or was Venerable Lotus joking with him? However, this Venerable Lotus really smelled like father. Now that he had grown bigger, his appearance was also very similar. And the way he talked to him was really no different from when he was teaching him in the Fantian Palace. Father is back? Father is back? Father is back. Father is back. This good news flooded his mind like crazy, from the initial disbelief to the final joy. Chapter 2233. The Heavenly Law Stone had been watching silently. It was shocked when Shinjiuli suddenly left, but it also knew that once the Divine Lord decided to do something, no one could stop him. Therefore it could only let him go. Before Shinjiuli left, he reminded the Heavenly Law Stone, Take good care of my son. Do not let any accident happen to him. Then he disappeared into the ground in a blink of an eye, leaving the Heavenly Law Stone there in a mess. It was the Heavenly Law, the Heavenly Law. What a high and mighty status. He actually treated it like an old mother. It even took care of his child. At first, the Heavenly Law Stone wanted to crazily refresh the crystal, but it suddenly stopped when it saw the expression on little Nianma's face. Little Nianma was in a daze at first. His eyes were wide open and his mouth was agape. Then he seemed to have realized something. His little face turned red and white, and his pair of big eyes began to fill with tears. His facial expression was as if he was crying and laughing at the same time. He seemed to be very happy but also very sad. He stood there stupidly and murmured, Father? Is it really father? I'm not dreaming, am I? He raised his hand and pinched his fleshy calf. Ouch. Then he opened his mouth and laughed foolishly. It is not a dream? I am not dreaming. The Heavenly Law Stone was a little worried. Was the child so happy that he became silly? Shinjiuli's impact on his son was indeed too big, and the child was still too young. When the Heavenly Law Stone was thinking about this, little Nianma had already cheered and jumped down from the lotus platform. He was jumping and jumping there. Father. Father is back. Haha, father is actually back. He was like a little fool running in circles there, as if his heart was about to explode with joy. In a moment of carelessness, his body bumped into a crystal, and he fell on his butt. The Heavenly Law Stone was afraid that he would really hurt his tender skin, so it quickly helped him up. After little Nianma jumped up, he suddenly rushed to the crystal cave wall and hit his little hands desperately. Let me out, let me out. Nianma wants to go with father to save mother. The heavenly law stone felt that it was in trouble. An overwhelming amount of greenery rushed over. The vegetation here was growing like crazy. The trees had grown into towering heights. The small grass that was originally a foot long had grown to the height of a small tree. The leaves were wide and large, cutting people like saws. Although this was a grassland, it was a grassland that had grown wildly. Not only were the plants here different from ordinary plants, they were exceptionally wide. Even the various animals that roamed the grassland were strangely tall. Centipedes that were more than 10 feet long could swim out of the bushes, and mantises that were 3 feet long could also jump out of the bushes, brandishing their sickles. A rabbit the size of a leopard could also jump out. Its pair of red eyes and fangs shone frighteningly under the sunlight. All in all, everything here was super large. As people walked through it, they almost suspected that they had been shrunk because anything that popped out was bigger than a person, and they were all attacking people. There was no path on the grassland. They had to rely on Ning Xuema and a few other netherworld generals to clear the way. The commoners walked to the center, although there were guards on both sides. After all, there were more commoners than soldiers. Moreover, they were scattered so they could not take care of everyone. From time to time, various kinds of ferocious beasts rushed out of the bushes and dragged people out. Screams and screams could be heard from the team from time to time. However, no one dared to stop. Everyone was running forward with all their might. No one dared to fall behind. Falling behind only meant one thing: death. Chapter 2234. Because there were too many ferocious beasts hiding in the bushes on both sides, once the troops stopped, it would be an absolute massacre. The weapons in the hands of the netherworld soldiers and generals never stopped. They kept running and fighting with all kinds of ferocious beasts that came out. Blood dyed the clothes of those generals red and dyed their eyes red. In front and behind them, countless ferocious beasts' corpses fell. Fortunately, this path was not considered long. When the super-huge cave appeared in front of them, everyone cheered. The demon master said that the cave was safe. As long as they entered the cave, they could take a breather. Almost everyone stared at the red-clothed demon master who was opening the path in front. He was their only hope to get out alive this time. Ning Xuema's heart sank slightly. She had a premonition that things were not good. She had already come to this grassland twice. In less than 2 hours, the grassland had already changed greatly. The grass was taller, and the beasts were fiercer. If she had not arranged the people of the underworld to advance in a formation, she was afraid that more than half of them would have died on this grassland. Even so, they had lost 300 to 400 people along the way. This was already the lowest number of casualties. The situation of the grassland had changed. She did not know if there were any changes in the cave. She waved her hand and made the troops behind her stop temporarily. She flew into the cave wanting to check the situation first. But she quickly retreated. A fishy wind blew in the cave, and a green-black huge creature came out from inside. It was a huge python with a long horn on its head. Its body was dozens of feet long, and its lantern-like vertical pupils were even taller than a person. It lay there, blocking the entrance of the cave completely. There was a person standing on top of the python's head. His purple robe fluttered in the wind, and his features were elegant. There was a smile on his lips. "Little Xuema, we meet again. Luo Jiuchen." He actually appeared again and blocked everyone's escape route. Everyone finally saw hope, and now this person suddenly appeared. It was obvious that he wanted to stop them from entering the cave. Everyone clenched their fists and their teeth were itching with hatred. All kinds of ferocious beasts had already popped their heads out from the bushes behind them, rushing over like a tide. It was obvious that they wanted to treat this group of people as food. Everyone's face changed color. The Nether King's eyes stared at the python. Suddenly he shouted with a trembling voice, "Hua!" The python's red pupils slightly trembled, and it looked at the Nether King. "Hua, why are you here?" Luo Jiuchen was Luo Jiuchen's mount. Ning Xuema's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know that the Hades clan's original body was a python. Was this big black python the substitute Hades king? Was he also controlled by Luo Jiuchen? She looked at the python and saw that its eyes weren't cloudy. It was obvious that it had intelligence. Lun Hua's Luo Huaz's Luo Huaz's? He's Huahuaz, the nether of the king's nether king's Huaz. Of any Hua, of the Hun of the Nev Huns? Any of the were was Luo Hua? Luo Nedli Luanit? Of the was of them. Not only did the Nether King's eyes turn red, but the eyes of all the generals of the underworld also turned red. A warrior would rather be killed than humiliated. Luo Jiuchen's actions were like taking a dump in the sky of the underworld. He didn't put the entire underworld in his eyes. Chapter 2235. The big python froze from his kick and did not move for a while. Speak. Luo Jiuchen kicked the python again. This time he seemed to have kicked an important part of the python. The python tensed up and finally said in a muffled voice, "Father, you don't have to care. I did volunteer to become Lord Luo's mount, the Netherworld King, all the Netherworld generals." They felt like they had been slapped in the face. Everyone's faces were burning. The Netherworld King clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Little bastard." The Netherworld King scolded. "You are so useless. I will treat it as if I don't have a son like you." The python lowered its eyes slightly, but Luo Jiuchen laughed loudly. His laughter was clear and melodious. "Nether King, it's his fortune to be able to be my mount." The Netherworld King said angrily, "You must have used some method to coerce him." Luo Jiuchen opened his folding fan and said casually, "You think your son was coerced? If I told you that your son was willing to cooperate with me and that he even contributed greatly to this operation, would you believe me?" The Netherworld King. He gritted his teeth. "Nonsense. Why would Hua scheme against her own people?" Luo Jiuchen shook his head and sighed. "Even if I told you the truth, you wouldn't believe me." He curled his lips into a smile and kicked the python beneath him with the tip of his foot. "Why don't you say it yourself?" Now that the truth had been exposed, the python closed its eyes and finally opened its mouth. "Father, I did participate in a large part of this operation. I sent some people to assist you." The Hell King's face paled. Actually, when he saw the assassins crushed to death by Ning Xuema's coffin and the spies caught by Ning Xuema, he had some suspicions. One of them looked like Huar's guard. He just didn't dare to believe it. Even if he recognized him, he didn't expose him. He wanted to go back to the Netherworld Palace and talk to his son. He didn't expect that. "Why did you do this?" The Netherworld King's voice trembled. He didn't know if he was angry or disappointed. The python seemed to have made up its mind. "I just don't want to be a powerless crown prince anymore. Ever since Imperial Father came back, those soldiers and subjects no longer listened to me." The Netherworld King. It turned out to be an old drama of father and son fighting for power. That son despised his father for being too old to succeed him, so he colluded with outsiders. At this moment, the back of the group had already been attacked by all kinds of ferocious beasts, and some of them were panicking. Ning Xuema was prepared in advance. She had already ordered the people to quickly form a circular formation. The warriors were at the outermost circle, and then set up a defensive barrier around them. Her psyche power was combined with the psyche power of the generals, so her defense was not weak. Therefore, the continuous attacks of the beasts were not effective for the time being. However, after all, the people had been running around for such a long time. They were all tired and impatient. The number of ferocious beasts was large and their attacks were fierce. After a while, the generals who were supporting the barrier began to feel the strain. If this continued, the barrier would break in less than an hour. Then, these 6,000 to 7,000 people would become a delicious meal for the ferocious beasts. The Netherworld King was obviously aware of this danger. He took a light breath and looked at Luo Jiuchen. "Supremacy Luo, the Netherworld realm has no enmity with you. Why do you have to force us?" Chapter 2236. Luo Jiuchen narrowed his eyes and smiled. His smile was still as bright as before. "Netherworld King, you are the master of a world. How can you be so naive? You should understand that sometimes, there is no enmity between us." The Netherworld King gritted his teeth. "Then what do you want?" Luo Jiuchen tapped his fan against his palm. "This is none of my business. You can ask your precious son what he wants." The Nether King and his subjects were stunned. Everyone turned to look at the giant python. Now that things had developed to this point, the python finally made up his mind and put forward his conditions. If they wanted to live, they had to go to his side, recognize him as their master, and follow him. Although the python's voice was muffled, the conditions it offered were tempting enough. As long as they followed him, recognized him as the new Netherworld King, and became his subordinates, he would be responsible for sending them out of this strange place and let them go home. Even the old Netherworld King was the same. After he came over, even if he handed over his power, he would take care of the old Netherworld King on account of their father-son relationship. These conditions were undoubtedly very tempting for the thousands of people who were fighting for their lives on the tip of a knife. Luo Jiuchen stood high up on the python's head, smiling as he looked at the dense crowd in front of him. He believed that once this condition was put out, at least 4/5 of the people here would join his camp. No one was not afraid of death, not to mention that the majority of this group of people were commoners. The smile on his lips was perfect. His eyes fell on Ning Xuema, waiting for the moment when she was betrayed by everyone. After all, these people of the Netherworld realm were not her subordinates. They would not risk their lives for her. Maybe they would betray him and stand on his side, leaving Ning Xuema to become a true loner. He wanted this girl to taste the feeling of being abandoned. Only when she suffered a fatal setback would she understand the situation and truly fall into his arms. However, after waiting for a moment, the smile on his face froze in the wind. There were 6,000 to 7,000 people here, but only a few dozen people walked over in fear. The others stood silently in their original spots, with no intention of moving at all. Forget about the Netherworld King and those old generals who were loyal to the Netherworld King. But what about the soldiers and the common people? Did they take the wrong medicine? Don't know how to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages? Not only did Luo Jiuchen's expression turn ugly, but the python also felt that it had lost all face. It glared at them with its pair of vertical pupils. I'll give you a moment more. If you don't come over, this king will no longer care about your lives. Marshal Lung finally couldn't help but spit. I'd rather be the tail of a phoenix than the head of a chicken. I won't accept a person who is willing to be someone's mount as my master. The others also looked at the python coldly. Obviously they had the same idea as Marshal Lung. Moreover, they had gone through thick and thin with the Devil Master for so long, so they already understood her personality. They would rather follow her and risk their lives than follow a mount leader and become subservient from then on. Luo Jiuchen stroked his fan and chuckled. Good, good. He had a backbone. I hope you will continue to be so unyielding. He patted the python's head with his fan and said, let's go. Take these people who are willing to follow you. He glanced at the few dozen people around him, smiled, and did not say anything else. Chapter 2237. The python snorted, turned around, and crawled into the cave. The dozens of people looked at each other and hurriedly followed. It was better to live than to die. They were just ordinary people and they just wanted to go home. Luo Jiuchen's voice came from the cave. If you follow me into this cave, it means that you have joined my camp. I will not treat you badly. I will wait for you here. Everyone looked at each other. This cave was the only way they could survive. If they stayed outside for a long time, the wizardry barrier would break, and they would not be able to resist the tide of beasts. Devil Master, what should we do next? The Netherworld King did not know what to do. He was relieved that his people did not betray him, and he felt a heavy responsibility. Even if he had to risk his life, he wanted to protect his people. But now they could not find another safe place, and the wizardry barrier could not hold on any longer. Ning Xuema looked at her surroundings before suddenly walking towards the pitch-black cave entrance. The old Netherworld King was shocked. Devil Master, we can't go in there. Otherwise we will be considered to have joined their camp. Ning Xuema looked at him with a faint smile. Your Majesty, why are you not willing to join his camp? After all, if you followed him you might be safe now. The old Netherworld King took a deep breath and said, although I am slow-witted, I can still distinguish between right and wrong. This High Lord has an evil heart. Even if I die, I will not submit to him and let my people become the slaves of an evil person. The others also said that this Lord was too evil. He actually used their children to practice evil skills. They would rather die than be associated with such a person. Some people even said that they would rather suffer with the Devil Master than be Luo Jiuchen's lackey in order to survive. In ancient times, it was difficult to win people's hearts. Ning Xuema had only been with these people for half a day, but she had already won their trust. The trust that was built up through trials and tribulations was the most unbreakable. This kind of trust could not be suppressed by violent means. Ning Xuema felt warm in her heart. She said slowly, thank you for your trust in me. I will do my best to let you go home safely. A promise was heavier than 1,000 caddies. The Nether King bowed deeply to Ning Xuema and said, my lord, from now on, the underworld will follow your orders. Previously, he had thought that this little Devil Master only had the courage of a fool, but after today's real contact, he discovered that this little Devil Master was truly brave and resourceful. Moreover, although she was a devil, she was able to stick to her bottom line and would not do anything that was too out of line. being compassionate at all times. Only such a person deserves to be the master of the 6 realms. Ning Xuema naturally understood what he meant. She knew that he wanted her to take the position of the master of the 6 realms. The image of Shinjuli flashed through his mind, and his heart suddenly ached. If he was still alive, if he was still by her side, why would she need to risk her life like this? However, no matter what, she would never take the position of master of the 6 realms. If she really took that position in the future and replaced him, perhaps he really wouldn't be able to return. She would not allow anyone but him to sit on that seat. As long as that seat was there was hope for him to come back. She didn't want to lose even this little bit of hope. She thought of the light that suddenly appeared to help her throw the person into the blood coffin. It was so similar to him. So similar to him. So similar to him. Chapter 2238. But it wasn't him after all. Otherwise, why didn't he appear in front of her when he was here? She was in a daze for a while. She didn't wake up until Pluto called her. Looking at Pluto's suspicious eyes, she coughed and shook her head. She shook off all the messy thoughts in her mind. Only Shinjuli's matter could make her distracted at such a tense time. She calmed down and continued to walk towards the cave. Devil Lord? Pluto was confused. Ning Xuemo raised her hand and touched the wizardry barrier at the entrance of the cave. She smiled faintly. This cave doesn't belong to him. Can he enter it? We can't enter it? It doesn't make sense. Let's just take this cave. When Luo Jiuchen appeared just now, she thought it would be a fierce battle. She didn't expect him to ride the black python into the cave so easily. This was not normal. Ning Xuema's heart skipped a beat. Maybe Luo Jiuchen was also injured. His kung fu was not as high as she thought. Maybe this was an opportunity. She had to seize it. When the Nether King and the others heard her words, it was as if they were suddenly enlightened. They were instantly enlightened. Yes, this cave did not belong to Luo Jiuchen. When enemies meet on a narrow path, the brave will win. Whoever has the harder fist will be qualified to occupy this cave. Maybe they were not Luo Jiuchen's opponents. Maybe they would die in his hands. But now, if they just waited outside, they would also die. They would die anyway, so they might as well fight. Everyone's eyes lit up. They were like wolves. Luo Jiuchen set up a wizardry barrier at the entrance of the cave. As soon as Ning Xuema's fingers touched it, she heard the spell that could unlock the barrier. As long as she pressed her hand on the barrier and shouted 3 times, "I am willing to follow the Lord," the barrier would let the person who shouted in. Ning Xuemo used her hand to touch the barrier. The corner of her lips curled up as she beckoned to the underworld generals. The generals came over to listen to her orders. Press your hands on the barrier and shout, "Luo Jiuchen, you bastard," 3 times and the barrier will open. Although the generals felt that the chant to break the barrier was too strange, they now had complete trust in Ning Xuema. Naturally, they would chant whatever Ning Xuema told them to. Therefore, the moment they placed their hands on the barrier, they shouted loudly, "Luo Jiuchen, you bastard." These people all had loud voices. Once they shouted, their voices could be heard from 10 miles away. What's more, 7 or 8 people shouted at the same time. That sound was enough to split rocks and pierce through clouds. However, it was only after they shouted that they realized that when their hands touched the enchantment, the chance to break the enchantment rang in their ears. Everyone couldn't help but be stunned. At the same time, Ning Xuema made her move. After making a few complicated hand gestures, a red light struck the barrier. The barrier almost broke with the shouts of the men. Everyone was stunned. Ning Xuema made a funny face. She jumped up and took the lead to rush into the cave. The Netherworld King didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This Devil Master was sometimes a little childish, but he was very likable. With this Devil Master leading the way, what else was there to be afraid of? They all followed behind and rushed into the cave. They didn't know what was strange around the cave. The ferocious beasts that were originally chasing after them retreated when they got close to the cave. Some of them couldn't bear to give up the delicious food that was about to enter their mouths, so they followed a few more steps. They didn't expect that these few steps would reveal their true colors. Chapter 2239. The rabbit that was as big as a leopard and the vole that was as big as a wild boar actually returned to their normal size in an instant and were killed by a few strong men. The cave was very deep, and the Nether King thought that he would be able to meet Luo Jiuchen here. However, he didn't expect that after walking in he wouldn't find any trace of Luo Jiuchen and his unfilial son. Even the dozens of people who had followed Luo Jiuchen were nowhere to be seen. The Nether King didn't know if he was disappointed or relieved. This cave was very wide, and even with so many people inside, it wasn't crowded at all. Instead, it was very spacious. Ning Xuema walked around the cave and looked into the depths of the cave. She said in a low voice, "They have already left." The danger had temporarily disappeared, and everyone heaved a sigh of relief. After running for so long, everyone was exhausted. The Nether King ordered everyone to sit down and rest. Everyone was eager to hear this order, and they sat down on the ground in a mess. Ning Xuema sat together with the Nether King and a group of high-ranking generals to discuss the next step. The result of the discussion was that Ning Xuema and a few high-ranking generals would go to the front to find a way to escape, while the others would rest and wait here. This was undoubtedly the best plan at the moment. It was very dangerous to bring a large group of people with them. After all, there were many ordinary people here and there were thousands of children. Not only would it slow down the journey, but it would also be more dangerous and cause more casualties. However, this place was relatively safe. With a few hundred soldiers protecting them, there would be less danger. Some of the people in Nether City suddenly realized that the most prosperous and lively street in the city had suddenly disappeared. The place that was supposed to be the street had become somewhere else. Those people who were far away from this street wanted to come here to watch the show, but they couldn't find this street anymore. A street could actually disappear. Those people were a little flustered and didn't understand what had happened. They were wandering around to search when a white light suddenly flashed in the crowd, and a white-robed youth appeared out of thin air. This youth wasn't tall and his face was young. He looked to be about 12 or 13 years old, but his face was shockingly beautiful. There were many handsome men in the netherworld, but compared to this youth they were like dirt and pearls. This youth had clearly appeared silently, but the moment he appeared, he was like a ball of moonlight that attracted everyone's attention. This young man was naturally Shinjiuli. Originally, he had wanted to wait until he had fully recovered before coming to see Ning Xuema and fiercely pulling her into his arms to protect her. However, this sudden change forced him to give up on this plan. After recovering less than a third of his power, he came out. His positioning was very accurate. The place where he appeared should be at that street, but after landing he found that it was far from the case. He had indeed landed on a street, but it wasn't the street with jade stones. The moment he appeared, he was surrounded by a circle of people. Shinjiuli had always been surrounded by onlookers in his life, so he didn't care about the gazes of the onlookers at all. After walking half a circle on the street, he understood what was going on. Someone had used a spell to hide the street. In other words, it was blocked. Normal people would never be able to find that place again. Shinjiuli pursed his lips slightly. He was naturally not a normal person. This kind of camouflage could not stop him. Thus, the citizens who were secretly watching saw a rather strange scene. Chapter 2240. That unbelievably beautiful young man in white made a hand gesture on the street and then disappeared into thin air. Disappeared. The curtains were fluttering in the wind, and the dust on the street was dancing in the wind. Cheap rouge, face powder, and all kinds of sundry goods filled the entire street. The wonton stall was still steaming and the hot water in the pot was still boiling. This used to be the busiest street in Nether City. At night, the street would be crowded with people, both rich and poor. They all liked to wander back and forth on this street. There might not be many things here, but there were definitely many people. But now, the street was suddenly empty. All the goods were still there, all the shops were still there, but there were no people. The wind blew from one end of the street to the other, and it was eerily desolate. Nether City was huge and there were hundreds of thousands of people in the city. Although this street was not long, there were usually 10 to 20,000 people moving around here. Now all these people were gone. Silence. The street was eerily quiet and no other sound could be heard. Shinjiuli finally appeared on the street that had disappeared. He appeared near the shop that sold the white jade doll. The shop had collapsed and there was only a pile of broken bricks and wood. The blood coffin was not far from the shop, and the lid of the coffin was still open. There were some blood stains at the bottom of the coffin. He stood in front of the coffin, and his fingers bent slightly to form a seal. A white light was emitted and it went around the blood coffin. After a moment he stopped and shook his head slightly. The souls of the people who fell into the blood coffin disappeared. His original plan of capturing a soul to interrogate had failed. He looked around and his heart sank. Jianghu teleportation technique. And a misty chain soul stealing array. That meant that someone had used the Jianghu teleportation technique to move all the people on this street into the misty chain soul stealing array. No matter if it was setting up such a big array or using the Jianghu teleportation technique, it required a very high level of technique. And in the 6 realms, there were only 2 people who could use this technique. One was himself and the other was Luo Jiuchen. Excluding himself, there was only one person who set up such a harmful array here, Luo Jiuchen. All of this was caused by this person. It seemed like he had been hiding in the crowd all this time, and then at the most critical moment, he activated the array formation and brought everyone in the street in. Who would have thought that after not seeing each other for tens of thousands of years, Luo Jiuchen had become so proficient in array formations? He was actually able to create such a complicated extermination array here. This was an extremely sinister and evil array. It could absorb the souls of all the people inside the array, causing them to be completely annihilated without leaving a corpse behind. Entering this array was equivalent to stepping on the steps of the Yama Palace. It was extremely difficult to turn back. Unless this array was completely destroyed or the person who set up the array was merciful and automatically released the people trapped inside, there was no way to save them. If he wanted to break this array, he could only find the core of the array inside and break it. There was nothing he could do outside the array. What was worse was that once the person who set up the array came out, he could activate all the mechanisms in the array from outside, causing all the mechanisms in the array to explode at once. At that time, it would be a great purgatory inside and no one would be able to find a safe place. They could only wait inside to be completely swallowed up by the array, and their souls would be condensed by the person who set up the array, becoming the source of an evil technique. Shinjuli was an expert in setting up arrays, so he naturally knew the dangers of this array. Chapter 2241. Shinjuli was an expert in setting up arrays, so he naturally knew the dangers of this array. Although Ning Xuema was smart enough, she would not be able to break the array with her abilities, so he had to go in to save her. But if Luo Jiuchen escaped and activated the array while he went in to save her, then both he and Ning Xuema would die inside, and the chances of them escaping would be almost zero. He closed his eyes slightly and opened them again. It did not matter. He did not believe that he could bear the pain of losing her again. So, they would live together and they would die together. He wanted to find her and be with her. He did not want to leave her alone to suffer the pain of losing him. His gaze swept over the surrounding shops inch by inch, and his figure was like the wind returning to the snow, patrolling the entire street. If he wanted to enter this array, he had to find the hidden array door. The array door was very small, and a bathtub could be this kind of array door, but it was hidden so well that it could not be found easily. To find such an array door among the countless shops on this long street was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Even Shinjuli, who had the ability to defy nature, would have to spend a lot of effort to find it. Fortunately, Shinjuli was extremely smart and had a strong sixth sense when it came to Ning Xuema, so he only circled the street twice before he found the array door in a bathhouse that was not much bigger than a mouse hole. He looked at the array door for a moment, and after confirming that there was no mistake, he threw a talisman at it. "My lord, are we just going to let them have the cave?" The black python's tone was somewhat unwilling. After all, they're your subjects and your father, aren't they?" Luo Jiuchen, who was on the black python's back, chuckled lightly, and one could not tell whether he was happy or angry from his laughter. The cave was unfathomably deep, and wherever the black python's scales went, there was a rustling sound, like a silkworm chewing on mulberry leaves, which made one's hair stand on end. The dozens of people who had surrendered hurriedly followed behind the black python. After a while, these people were even more exhausted, and one of them could not help but ask, "Your Majesty, my lord, are we going back?" Black python didn't speak. Luo Jiuchen's voice was gentle. "Yes, I'll send you home now." There was the sound of water flowing in front of them. Those people were in a hurry and were very thirsty. When they heard the sound of water, they were overjoyed and followed the sound. The black python opened its mouth as if to say something, but Luo Jiuchen, who was on its back, gently tapped it with his foot and it closed its mouth. Sure enough, those people found a small stream. The water was clear and cold to the touch. Everyone cheered and rushed to the stream. They squatted down and scooped up the water to drink. One of them was more cautious. Before drinking, he asked, "My lord, is this water drinkable?" Luo Jiuchen's voice was faint. "Yes, this water is called honey fantasy. It tastes sweet and makes people want to drink more." His words put everyone at ease and they all fetched water to drink. This water was indeed extremely sweet, and it indeed made people want to drink more after drinking it, endlessly drinking it. Everyone drank until their stomachs bulged, but they still couldn't drink enough. After drinking a mouthful, it was as if they were addicted and couldn't stop their desire to drink more. Some of them simply lay in the stream and drank like a cow. Some people finally realized that something was wrong while drinking the water. They wanted to stop and get up, but they couldn't. The water that entered their stomachs seemed to be melting their whole body. Then they realized in horror that they were indeed melting. Chapter 2242. After a while, the dozens of people who were drinking water were gone. Their bodies turned into water and flowed into the stream. Not even their bones were left. The black python looked in the direction of the stream with pity in its eyes. Luo Jiuchen patted its head. It's just a few dozen people. You feel sorry for them? The black python's voice was stiff. There are subjects after all, Luo Jiuchen chuckled. Idiot, do you think they're really loyal to you now? They just want to borrow your strength to go home. If you really take them in as your subordinates, they'll betray you faster than anyone else once you're in trouble. He flew down and stood by the stream. His fingers drew in the air, and a moment later, dozens of transparent souls were pulled out of the water. The black python watched helplessly as the souls of its subjects were rolled into a ball by this elegant high lord, and then swallowed like a pill. During this time, it could hear the wails and screams of the souls as they were squeezed. Its body trembled slightly, but it didn't dare to make a sound. Luo Jiuchen finished the soul ball and sighed. So little. It's not enough to fill the gaps between my teeth. I'm so hungry. His eyes turned to the black python. The black python stiffened under his gaze. Lord. Luo Jiuchen walked over slowly and patted its head. Don't be afraid. As long as you're loyal to me, I won't treat you badly. I'll still support you to be the lord of the underworld. The black python lowered its head. Thank you. Its body trembled slightly. Luo Jiuchen smiled and seemed to think of something. A green pill appeared in his palm and he gently fed it to the black python. Is your injury hurting again? Here, this is the antidote. The black python hurriedly swallowed it. A moment later, its trembling body finally returned to normal. Its eyes were filled with resentment. Lord, will all the people who came in this time die? Luo Jiuchen corrected it. You and I won't die. He smiled leisurely. Do you feel sorry for your father and your subjects? The black python paused and said coldly, Lord, you said that to achieve great things one must not care about trifles. One must know how to give up. Not bad. You're worth teaching. Luo Jiuchen praised him. Only 10,000 people have been trapped this time. Compared to the hundreds of thousands of people in the underworld, this is just a drop in the ocean. You will have enough officials in the future. Then my lord, that girl, she will also stay here forever, right? Luo Jiuchen narrowed his eyes. He naturally knew who the girl, the black python, was referring to. He smiled faintly and didn't say anything. There seemed to be wind and clouds swirling in his eyes. He turned around and jumped onto the back of the black python. He said faintly, Let's go. We still have a lot of things to do. Black Python was not satisfied that he did not get the answer he wanted. My lord, that girl has repeatedly ruined your plans. She's the most restless one. If she doesn't die, I'm afraid she'll affect your grand plan. Luo Jiuchen kicked it with the tip of his foot. There was still a smile in his voice, but his words were icy. Do you think you have the right to interfere in my affairs? The black python's bones were about to be broken by his kick. Its scales were trembling. Although it was unwilling, it did not dare to say anything. It could only continue to crawl forward with him on its back. Luo Jiuchen waved his fan and looked forward. There was a smile on his lips, and there seemed to be waves of light flowing in his eyes. Chapter 2243. No one could guess what he was thinking. Perhaps even he didn't understand it. Did he love little Shuema now? Or was it an obsession because he couldn't get what he wanted? This time he would force her into a corner and make her give in to him. Little Shuema, you are mine. I was clearly the one who met you first. That person was born with everything. He could get whatever he wanted. As a sub-god he couldn't get anything. Power, women, and the worship of the 6 realms. Finally that person died. Finally he made a name for himself, but he still couldn't get what he wanted. Even that broken stone didn't recognize him. Since that was the case, he would climb to that high position with his own efforts and become the strongest person in the 6 realms. He wanted all the people in the 6 realms to be his slaves. As for that broken stone, when he found it again, he would directly cut it into pieces. Since the heavenly Tao didn't recognize him, he would become the heavenly Tao. This was Luo Jiuqin's idea and purpose. In order to achieve this purpose he would do anything. If God blocked him he would kill God. If Buddha blocked him he would kill Buddha. Only by becoming the absolute strongest would he be able to obtain what he wanted, anything. Including that girl. He closed his eyes slightly and turned his wrist. A child's blue robe appeared in his palm. She had personally put on this blue robe for him and even tidied his collar. There was still the scent of her fingertips on it. His fingers stroked the blue robe inch by inch as if he was touching the girl's body. The body that made his teeth itch with hate and love. Shuma, I will wait for you in front. I have prepared a lot of things for you. You will like them. Ning Shuema shivered for no reason. The hair on her body stood up. It felt like being stared at by a wolf in the dark. It was a very bad feeling. She looked around. She was surrounded by blue walls. She tried her best but couldn't see the end of the cave. She and a few high-ranking generals of the underworld had been walking in this cave for an hour, but they still couldn't find the exit. This cave was so long that it seemed like it would never end. What was worse was that from time to time, all kinds of ferocious beasts would come out of the cave and block their path. Those ferocious beasts came in all shapes and sizes. They were even more bizarre than the ones in his dreams. Moreover, all of them were extremely evil. The strangest thing was that these ferocious beasts didn't seem to have been hiding somewhere before coming out. It was as if he had appeared out of thin air. The two sides of the cave were clearly ordinary mountain walls, but in the blink of an eye, a ferocious beast could be seen transforming from the mountain walls, roaring and pouncing towards them. Fortunately, Ning Shuema's martial arts were extremely high. Before these beasts could even reach her, they were split into two halves by her sword. In addition, those people were not easy to deal with, so these ferocious beasts did not cause any real damage to them. This time, Marshal Tai Shuileng was by Ning Shuema's side. He smashed a ferocious beast to death with his hammer and snorted, "Strange. Just as I was thinking about it, it appeared." Another burly man in blue said, "I'm not afraid of these ferocious beasts, but I'm most afraid of rats." The tall and thin man beside him laughed. "What's so scary about rats? Old Chui, you're really..." Haha, if a group of rats appeared now, I think Old Chui would immediately collapse. Before he could finish his words, he heard a squeaking sound coming from the depths of the cave. Chapter 2244. Lao Chue's expression changed drastically. The tall and thin man opened his mouth slightly. "No way. What we fear is coming." Countless small red eyes appeared in the darkness, as dense as the stars in the sky. Lao Chue's scalp went numb. Rats? Yes, rats, and a large group of rats. It was unknown how many thousands of them were running towards them. "Help!" Lao Chue screamed. His tone had changed. He wanted to find a place to hide, but the cave was extremely flat. He couldn't even find a tall stone. Ning Shuema's heart skipped a beat. She finally knew what the problem was. The monsters in the cave are all from your imagination. The more you fear, the more likely it is to come. Stop thinking nonsense. As she spoke, she tried to imagine a cat eating a rat. She thought that a large group of cats would appear, but she didn't expect that she couldn't even find a cat hair. She had an idea. Could it be that only the things you are afraid of come out from this cave? She immediately said, "Who is afraid of cats? Hurry up and think." Damn it, there were too many rats. Although they couldn't hurt her, she, who had a slight trypophobia, felt her scalp tighten. After a while, no cats appeared. Lao Chue, who was afraid of rats, was embarrassed. "Devil Master, I am only afraid of rats and not cats." The others shook their heads. "Yes, we are not afraid of cats." Ning Shuema was speechless. She took a deep breath. The rats were about to crawl onto her. She waved her hand and a large fireball appeared. The rats ran into the fireball and were burned to ashes in an instant. These rats were afraid of fire. Ning Shuema finally let out a sigh of relief. That big fireball followed the direction where the rats came from and rolled forward, crushing all of them into ashes. A moment later, all the rats were gone and everyone heaved a sigh of relief. At this time, everyone knew the origin of these ferocious beasts. They subconsciously emptied their minds and tried not to think about those ferocious beasts. As a result, fewer and fewer ferocious beasts appeared later on. Ning Shuema seemed to have thought of something. She immediately ordered Lao Chue, "Hurry back and report to Pluto. Tell him the origin of these ferocious beasts, lest the people there think too much and think of a bunch of ferocious beasts to be attacked." Lao Chue hurriedly agreed and left as fast as he could. After entering this damned place, all the voice transmission talismans had lost their effectiveness, so they had to use the most primitive method to transmit messages. General Lung sighed. As expected, the Devil Master is so thoughtful. This place is really strange. I can actually get whatever I want. If I want food, I can get food. I'm so thirsty and hungry right now. Ever since they came in, they hadn't had a single drop of water. After running around for so long, they were naturally hungry and thirsty. Ning Xuema also frowned slightly. This place was extremely strange. She had already abstained from eating and would be fine even if she didn't eat for a few years. But at this moment she actually felt hungry and thirsty, his stomach was twitching and it was a little painful. She was like this, what about the others? It seemed that she had to quickly find the array core and break this array. Otherwise, these people would die of thirst and hunger even if they weren't killed by the ferocious beast here. But where was the array core? She was considered to be experienced and knowledgeable, but this was the first time she had seen this array. Luo Jiuchen, that bastard, was really something. He could actually set up such an abnormal and high-level evil array. Chapter 2245. Of course, the others also thought of this. They were all anxious and rushed forward. The sound of water splashing came from the front. Everyone's eyes lit up and rushed forward. They saw a small stream in front of them. The stream was gurgling with a cool and sweet fragrance. I'm so thirsty. An impatient man rushed over and wanted to drink it. A ray of light hit his wrist. Ning Xuema's voice came with the light. You can't drink this water. What? The man's eyes were as big as copper bells. He took out a silver spoon from nowhere and stuck it into the water. After a while he pulled it out. The silver spoon didn't change color. It shouldn't be poisonous. Ning Xuema's voice was slightly cold. Using silverware to test for poison is a practice in the human world. It's absolutely not allowed here. If you believe me, don't question me anymore. That one sentence made everyone shut their mouths. In such a dangerous place, what they needed was absolute obedience to their leader. Only then would they be able to display their greatest strength. If the leader had to explain every order he gave, he was afraid that he would miss every opportunity. Everyone followed Ning Xuema around the stream and continued to move forward. The stream was indeed not poisonous. However, Ning Xuema had a very strong sixth sense the moment she saw the stream. She felt that the water must not be drunk. Her sixth sense had always been very sharp. It had saved her life several times. This time was no exception. They ran forward for a while, and a little light appeared in front of them. Could it be the exit of the cave? Everyone's spirits were lifted, and they ran even faster. The sun in the sky was pale like a silhouette. All the mountain peaks were covered in a thick layer of white snow. Nearby there were ice peaks that rose from the ground, crisscrossing like awls. The cold wind blew the fan-sized snowflakes into the sky. Everyone did run out of the damn cave, but what they saw was such a scene. When the cold wind blew, almost everyone shivered. What the hell is this place? Some people couldn't help but scratch their heads. On the other side of the cave, the grass was luxuriant. It was summer, and people were sweating all over even though they were only wearing a single shirt. Unexpectedly, there was a glacier on the other side of the cave. This was really 2 seasons in one cave. It couldn't be any weirder. General Lung licked his dry lips. Is this snow edible? It was good to moisten his throat with snow. Ning Xuemo raised her hand to catch a snowflake. She brought it to her nose and smelled it. She shook her head slightly. It's the same as the stream water. You can't eat it. She was thirsty too, but she didn't want to lose her life here. Little Xuema, in the end you still chased after me. Have you finally thought it through and decided to submit to me? A voice came from the mountain peak not far away. Everyone raised their heads and saw a person sitting cross-legged on the peak. His purple robe was particularly eye-catching in the snow, and it also made his handsome face look like it was carved out of white jade. In front of him was a table full of food and wine. There were dozens of plates filled to the brim with delicacies from land, sea, and air. The aroma of the wine mixed with the fragrance of the dishes drifted down and entered the noses of everyone who was hungry. As a result, everyone's stomachs rumbled with hunger. This bastard definitely did it on purpose. He wanted to use this to break down their defenses. The mountain peak was not very high, only about 100 feet high. Therefore, Ning Xuema and the others could clearly see Luo Jiuchen's expression and the table full of food and wine. Chapter 2246. Oh, it smells so good. Luo Jiuchen took a bite of the duck leg and drank the wine in front of him. He smiled like a flower. Do you want to drink and chat with me? Everyone swallowed hard. They knew what Luo Jiuchen meant. Once they drank and chatted with him, it was equivalent to surrendering to him indirectly. Luo Jiuchen, you're despicable. Even if we die of thirst or hunger, we won't give in to you. That's right. You better get rid of that idea of yours. Among the people who followed Ning Xuema, although there was no lack of uncouth men, they were all hot-blooded men. They were unyielding and would rather die than eat food given to them. Luo Jiuchen wasn't angry. He even clapped his hands and gave everyone a thumbs up. Good. You're ambitious. I hope you'll always be so ambitious. He licked his cherry-red lips. Actually, I like to eat the flesh of ambitious people. It must be more delicious than others. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts. One of them shouted, "What about the people who left with you?" Luo Jiuchen turned to look at him and didn't answer directly. Did you see a cool stream when you came? So what if I did? Luo Jiuchen smiled. Nothing much. The people you care about are now in the stream and have become part of the water in the stream. Everyone. Some people still didn't believe him. Nonsense. We didn't see their bodies at all. Luo Jiuchen tapped his folding fan on his palm. I like cleanliness. How can I let such disgusting things like corpses appear? Even if I want to kill people, I have to find the best way to kill them. For example, turning into water or smoke. Everyone felt cold and a few of them turned pale. Although they didn't drink the water, they held it with both hands. Now their hands felt sticky as if they were stained with blood. Those who held the water couldn't help but wipe their fingers on their bodies. Luo Jiuchen saw their expressions. He closed his folding fan and smiled. You all touched the water? Oh, it will eat your skin. This water likes to corrode people's skin. Those people's expressions changed again and they felt their fingers itch. They couldn't help but want to cut off their itchy hands with their swords. Don't fall for his illusions. That water doesn't have this kind of poison. Ning Xuema suddenly spoke in a low voice. His clear voice was like an icy spring, causing those who had almost been hit to wake up in an instant. They looked at the swords that had been drawn and shuddered. This Luo Jiuchen was indeed very capable. With just a few words, he had almost hooked them into a nightmare and made them do as he wished. Ning Xuema raised her hand, and a faint blue light swept across everyone's palms. These people felt as if their palms had been thoroughly washed by water, and finally returned to normal. Ah, little Xuema, you are indeed very capable. You were actually able to see through my technique. What a pity. Unfortunately, I was only one step away from taking their hands to go with the wine. Everyone looked at their own hands, then looked at Ning Xuema. Their eyes were filled with admiration and joy. If it weren't for the Devil Lord, all the people trapped in the underworld would have been annihilated. This Luo Jiuchen was even more cunning than a fox. There were traps everywhere. There were ambushes everywhere. If they weren't careful, they would be wiped out. Chapter 2247. You must have had a hard time coming here. Why don't you come up and have a drink? This seat is purely inviting you. Luo Jiuchen sat there with a smile that could topple kingdoms. Purely? Only a ghost would be pure. Everyone was about to refuse loudly when Ning Xuema suddenly raised her eyebrows and answered crisply, "Okay." Her figure flashed and she pounced toward the mountain peak. She obviously wasn't going to drink. She was going to kill. The sky regicide in her hand drew a beautiful and cruel arc in the air as it swept toward Luo Jiuchen. Aya, so powerful. Luo Jiuchen chuckled. He suddenly lay down on the ground and disappeared from the ice mountain peak. Everyone, the moment Ning Xuema made a move, they thought they would see an earth-shattering battle. They didn't expect that person to escape just like that. Escape. He didn't even make a move against Ning Xuema. Everyone felt a sense of loss. They looked at Ning Xuema again. She actually put away her sword and circled around the table of food and wine. Marshal Lung and the others hurriedly flew over. Devil Master, you can't eat this food and wine. Ning Xuema looked up at him. Marshal Lung felt pressured when he was stared at by her big watery eyes. However, he still said dutifully, "That person left without a fight, but left such a big table of food and wine for us. It's obviously a trap. He must have done something to the food and wine." Ning Xuema's eyes flashed. She looked at the table of food and wine in a daze. On a hillside, Luo Jiuchen sat casually on a rock. In front of him was a water mirror. The figures of Ning Xuema and the group of people appeared clearly in the mirror. The big black python was also coiled there like a small mountain. Its long and narrow eyes were also looking at the water mirror. It couldn't help but ask, My lord, you must have poisoned the food and wine, right? Luo Jiuqin shook his fan and chuckled. Why do you say that? The big black python said, it's obvious that you're leaving it for them. But I don't think they'll fall for it. No matter how hungry they are, their lives are more important. They won't eat it. Back then, they didn't even drink that little stream. The smile at the corner of Luo Jiuqin's lips became even more obvious. He suddenly said leisurely, there's no poison in those dishes. The big black python widened its eyes. Why would I set up such a simple trap? They will miss this delicious meal, and when they leave for a while, there will definitely be fierce beasts eating those. Then they will see that those fierce beasts are all fine, but the delicious wine and dishes are already gone. At that time, their expressions of extreme regret will definitely be wonderful. Luo Jiuqin smiled even more happily, as if he could already see their regretful expressions. He stared at Ning Xuema's face. Her little face was a little weathered, and her lips, which used to be like rose petals, were now a little dry, like petals that had lost their moisture. This girl was like a rose full of thorns. If he wanted to pluck her, he had to remove the thorns all over her body. This process might make her suffer and even make his heart ache. But if he didn't do this, how could he win the beauty back? He looked at the green shirt in his hand again, and a glimmer of light flashed through his eyes. If only she had bought this shirt specially for him. This little girl deserved a lesson. He had never understood what it meant to adapt to circumstances. Ha ha, their expressions will definitely be very wonderful. Especially that foodie General Lung. That guy's eyes will turn green from hunger if he doesn't eat. Now that he hasn't eaten for more than a day, if he misses this meal, he will definitely vomit blood with regret. Chapter 2248. The big black python also stared at the water mirror excitedly, waiting for those people to leave reluctantly. Unexpectedly, Ning Xuema circled around the table and suddenly reached out to grab a big drumstick and took a bite. It tastes good. Luo Jiuqin, the big black python, General Lung and the others thought that Ning Xuema was confused by hunger, so they rushed forward to snatch it. Devil Master. You really can't eat this. Ning Xuema's body spun around, avoiding those people who were trying to snatch the food. Instead, she boldly sat down. Don't worry. These dishes aren't poisonous. Everyone can eat and drink to your heart's content. There won't be such a good thing later. She picked up the wine pot on the table and took a big gulp. General Lung and the others now had absolute trust in Ning Xuema. Seeing her like this, they immediately sat down. Okay. Then let's have a good meal and hurry on with our journey. The few of them swept away the remaining clouds. A moment later, the table full of food was in their stomachs. The cups and plates were a mess, and there wasn't even a vegetable soup left. General Lung burped contentedly, his face full of admiration. Devil Master, how do you know that the food is not poisonous? Ning Xuema smiled. Have you ever heard of the saying, the real is the fake and the fake is the real? He probably wanted to see us regret missing out on this meal. Unfortunately. Ha ha ha, unfortunately he didn't expect us to really eat it. Right now, he must be hiding in some corner, peeking at us and vomiting blood in anger. Another general felt very comfortable. Ning Xuema smiled and stood up. She picked up a plate. Come, on the account that he painstakingly prepared such a table of food for us, let's thank him. With a shake of her hand, the plate flew out and fell on a stone. Luo Jiuqin, thank you. The others followed suit and smashed all the plates and cups on the table into pieces. Every time they smashed something they would say, thank you. Each word was louder and louder than the last. The big black python couldn't help but look at Luo Jiuqin beside it. The smile on his lips had long disappeared, and his handsome face was a little pale. The fan in his hand was crushed by him. Killing intent seeped out of his body, causing the scales on the large black python to almost stand on end. It quietly moved back, then moved again for fear of touching the tail of his typhoon. Luo Jiuqin laughed again. She's getting smarter and smarter now. Crafty like a little fox. Don't worry, there are still many good things waiting for her. No matter how crafty the little fox is, she can't escape from the hunter's palm. The big black python watched as Ning Xuema and the others smashed their plates and began to walk deeper into the valley. It was a little puzzled. Where are they going? She doesn't think that the exit is on that peak, does she? Luo Jiuqin looked at the direction Ning Xuema and the others were heading and frowned slightly. Although this formation of his was incomparably complicated, it was still inseparable from the basic principles. It was still inseparable from the arrangement of the 5 elements. There was an array core on the highest peak of the snowy mountain. Could it be that the little girl had already seen through the layout of this grand array? Impossible, right? He had studied this grand array for many years and had never used it before. Moreover, it didn't conform to the layout of ordinary arrays at all. The more proficient one was at setting up arrays, the easier it was to walk into a dead end inside. Luo Jiuchen had suffered a lot from Xinjiuli's arrays in his life. Gradually he had become an array master. This grand array was actually specially designed to deal with Xinjiuli. Now, to deal with Ning Xuema and the others, he felt that using a sledgehammer to crack a nut was an overkill. Chapter 2249. Now, it seemed that he was lucky to have used this array, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to trap this girl. He looked up at the sky and his lips curled into a smile. Without the special antidote, even if they sat still in this array, their vitality would be sucked away. Even if they had enough food, they would gradually lose their strength, and at that time, they would still be at his mercy. He sat on the ground and looked at Ning Xuema and the rest as they flew across the snowy ground. His lips curled into a smile again. He watched from where he was. That girl's every move was under his control. She was in the open while he was in the dark. Was he worried that he couldn't subdue her? Seeing that Ning Xuema and the rest had reached the gap between the 2 mountains, Luo Jiuchen's fingers slightly stretched out as if he wanted to do something but hesitated. After a moment, he seemed to have decided on something. With a flick of his finger, a purple light danced in the air and went straight into the clouds. In the water mirror, there was a loud rumble. A muffled sound came from the 2 snowy mountains. A gray line rolled up and poured down towards the valley. It was an avalanche. The surging snow carried the power to destroy the heavens and exterminate the earth as it rolled downwards, heading straight for Ning Xuema's group. Luo Jiuchen stared at the water mirror and watched as Ning Xuema and the rest turned and ran the moment they saw the avalanche. Luo Jiuchen chuckled. He knew that the avalanche this time wouldn't take that girl's life. With her speed, she would definitely be able to escape the avalanche. He was only doing this to teach her a small lesson. There would be a big meal later. He glanced at one of the mountains. There was a platform on that mountain. It wasn't far from Ning Xuema and the rest and could be used to avoid the avalanche. He believed that with Ning Xuema's eyesight she would definitely see the platform and run there, and he had prepared another big meal waiting for her there. The avalanche was like a torrential downpour as it chased closely behind Ning Xuema and the others. Ning Xuema seemed to have seen the platform and even pointed at it. The avalanche was too loud, so Luo Jiuchen couldn't clearly hear what Ning Xuema shouted. However, from her gesture, it seemed like she was calling for everyone to take shelter on the platform. However, a sudden change occurred in an instant. Ning Xuema, who was running like the wind, suddenly tripped over something. With a plop, she fell into the snowy ground. The others subconsciously tried to pull her up, but the result was that they were overtaken by the rolling snow behind them. The rumbling sounds of the avalanche shook the heavens and the earth. The avalanche engulfed everything and directly annihilated those few people. It continued to rush forward. Luo Jiuchen's expression changed. He suddenly stood up. The black python, on the other hand, was in high spirits. Its eyes were wide open as it stared at the snowy surface. After an unknown amount of time, the avalanche finally stopped. Everything was calm again. This time, the avalanche was extremely powerful. More than half of the snow on the 2 snowy peaks rolled down, and the shape of the entire mountain changed. The place where Ning Xuema and the rest had climbed was covered by countless layers of snow. The black python circled the snow 3 times and did not see anyone coming out of the snow. The water mirror was white and there was no other color at all. Those people were buried under the snow. The black python understood that the snow here was not normal snow. The snow here could also absorb people's elemental energy. Even if one stepped on the snow, their elemental energy would be slowly drained from their boots, making them weak. Not to mention being buried under such snow? Those people buried under the snow, even if they did not suffocate to death, their elemental energy would be quickly absorbed by the snow. They would not even have the strength to get up. Chapter 2250. It had once seen with its own eyes a snow leopard accidentally fall into a snow cave that wasn't too deep. Before it could jump up, it fell limply to the bottom of the pit, unable to stand up. In the end, it became as soft as cotton and didn't even have the strength to breathe. In less than an hour, it was completely dead. If it hadn't taken the antidote Luo Jiuqin gave it in advance, it would have been exhausted after crawling in the snow. In this array, although Ning Xuema and the others still had their skills, they couldn't use half of their strength and couldn't use many spells. Now that they were buried by the avalanche, how could they survive? My lord, they actually died here. The avalanche swallowed them. The black python's voice couldn't hide its excitement. Luo Jiuqin kept staring at the snow, his eyes dark. No one knew what he was thinking. After a moment he suddenly stood up. Wait here, I'll go take a look. He disappeared in a flash. The black python, Luo Jiuqin, had walked around the snow between the two peaks no less than 8 times, especially the place where Ning Xuema and the others were swallowed by the avalanche. He carefully searched. But there was nothing. He couldn't sense any aura from her. Even if she was buried several feet under the snow, as long as she breathed lightly, he would be able to sense it and pull her out in time. But there was nothing. Did she really die like this? Impossible, right? She was the Devil Master. Even if her skills were reduced by half, she wouldn't die so easily. He stood in the snow for a long time but couldn't find her. He made up his mind and used the spirit summoning spell. Using the spirit summoning spell in the snow would waste several times more mental power than usual. Even Luo Jiuqin didn't want to use it casually here. After a moment he finished using the spell. He gathered the souls of a few fierce beasts, but there were no souls of Ning Xuema and the others. After a long time he was still empty-handed. Not only was he not disappointed, his eyes lit up. That girl didn't die. Even her companions didn't die. In that situation, how did she do it? If she didn't die and wasn't under the snow, then where could she have gone? He actually let someone slip away right under his nose. What a cunning girl. Luo Jiuqin exhaled softly. He didn't know if he was relieved or angry. Don't let me catch you again. His eyes flickered slightly. Next time he would not play the cat and mouse game with her. He would directly put her down and use the most direct method to obtain her. He thought for a moment. With that girl's intelligence, she probably guessed that there was an array core hidden on the mountain peak. At this time she probably went straight for the array core. He leaped up and headed to the highest point of the mountain. He wanted to go to the eye of the array to take a look. Perhaps he could catch her directly. Deep underground, rocks were everywhere and drops of water turned into ice. At this moment, Ning Xuema, General Leng, and the others were underground inside a light green barrier. Ning Xuema's face was exceptionally pale. It was obvious that she had expended a lot of energy. General Leng and the others looked at her with admiration. If she hadn't pulled them to use the earth-burrowing technique at the critical moment, they would probably have lost their lives this time. General Leng and the others usually used this spell, but they couldn't use it after entering this place. They didn't expect Ning Xuema to be able to use it in time and pull a bunch of people along with her. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.